Gladiator gave him no breath. In a blink he appeared overhead, driving his spear down. The attack was so vast Fry had to teleport to avoid it. The spear punched into the earth and shook it, carving a crater that plunged hundreds of meters below. Fry reappeared at mid-range, taking in the devastation wrought by a single strike from Gladiator. This is SSS. This is the level my worst enemies stand at. The level I'll have to face sooner or later. Can I win against power like this? His eyes burned violet behind the slits of the nameless mask. He readied himself to charge again with everything he had, while Gladiator walked toward him with the calm of a king. It's pointless, Fry Starlight. This power is beyond your comprehension, far outside your league. This is the power of a ruler, the power of an absolute standing at the summit of the world. Gladiator spread his arms wide, bathing in a deluge of light aura. This is the power that will bend the world to its knees, he declared. You talk too much, Fry snapped back. In the blink of an eye, his arms knit whole, and he vanished, reappearing directly before Gladiator. 10,000 steps of shadow supreme art. Abyssal wave. Boom! In less than a second, Fry unleashed a catastrophic storm of shadow slashes, a barrage that rattled space itself, targeting every inch of Gladiator's body. But Gladiator simply raised his colossal shield and took the onslaught head-on, letting it devour the impacts. Frey's strikes erased everything around Gladiator, reducing the world to ruin. Yet beneath the bishop's feet the ground remained intact. That shield had blocked it all. Peering from behind the shield, Gladiator regarded Fry for a heartbeat, then spoke a single word. Rebound. At that command, the shield flared strangely, and a heartbeat later it discharged a violent counterforce, a wave that smashed through Fry and everything behind him. Fry was hurled away again through wreckage and splinters, only barely arresting his flight by driving both blades into the earth to anchor himself. When he finally steadied, he was stunned by how far he'd been thrown, and by the swath of devastation wrought by the shield's rebound alone. He didn't hesitate. He launched himself again, reappearing before Gladiator at the speed of light. Both blades hammered the shield, unable to break through, while Gladiator thrust with his spear, aiming to crush him in a single blow. Fry twisted away at the last instant, flipping through the air and dropping in behind the bishop. Riding his blistering speed, Frey's swords flared with shadow and darkness alike, drawing deeper and deeper on the aura within him. But even at that speed, Gladiator kept pace, answering him cleanly and on time. They traded blows in a non-stop torrent, Gladiator stabbing thousands of times, Fry striking with his blades just as many. Auras collided. Steel screamed against light. Little by little, fractures and wounds mounted across Fry Starlight's body. But he didn't care. Shadow adaptation knit him together the moment he broke. He refused to back down, not for an instant, pouring everything he had into the fight. I want to know how far I can go against power like this. Against true power, the absolute, how long could Fry Starlight stand? This body I forged in blood and fire. This strength I stacked brick by brick after a road of calamities. My power, my skills, my gifts, every piece of me, everything I've built in this dark life, everything I've suffered on this long, brutal road. Tell me, Gladiator, is what I have enough? Boom! Their chaotic exchange swelled and quickened until, to distant onlookers, it was nothing but a storm of black slashes constantly colliding with volleys of pure white light. The clash spanned a colossal swath of land, swollen with overwhelming, absolute force. Your strength is paltry, Fry Starlight. Boom! With Gladiator's roar, light surged, swallowing the darkness again in terrifying waves. But Fry snapped the tide back, unleashing more and more shadow aura. 10,000 steps of shadow supreme art. Eternal blackout. Slay Ash. With a single abyssal cut, space itself tore before Fry, and from that one stroke bloomed thousands of black arcs. A cascade of slashes that matched Gladiator's light on equal footing. Gladiator refused to let him breathe. He punched through the dark torrent, driving his shield, breaking through everything until he was suddenly in Frey's face. The instant he closed, Gladiator stabbed at light speed, intent on blowing Frey's head apart. But the strike froze midair, unable to touch him. Skill, screenshot. Time locked for 1 second. In that single second, Frey's blades deepened to a darker night, his arms moving like ceaseless rocket batteries. With every fraction of that heartbeat, more and more violet gouges carved across Gladiator's armored frame, one after another, strike upon strike, until that endless second finally ended. In less than a second, Frey delivered over 10,000 blows, his current absolute peak. And yet the overwhelming barrage did nothing more than scratch Gladiator's colossal shield. Frey had thrown nearly all of the supreme techniques of 10,000 steps of shadow, the very pinnacle of that domineering style, and still couldn't pierce his opponent's defense. "These tricks won't help you anymore," Gladiator said, firing a missile of light at him. Frey crossed his blades in an X to meet it, but the cannonade pulverized him as if a mountain had been dropped on his head. Every bone in Frey's body shattered. Blood erupted from everywhere. He clenched his teeth, ignoring the catastrophic damage, letting that violet fire roar through him as it force-healed his flesh, and he dove back in. "I'll break that damned shield even if it kills me. Then let me see you try." Boom! They slammed together again, trading blows as they ran and flew across the vast forest. From afar, the spectators saw nothing but two beams, one of shadow, one of light, twisting and colliding as they streaked through the world. Shockwaves rolled on and on. The aura they were burning belonged to another realm entirely. From a distance, Snow Lionheart watched the duel with Uriel Platini Latini lying behind him. Aegon Valyrian stood near Callistus. They too beheld the battle, though they clearly had no intention of staying, with Callistus already preparing to flee. But Snow's eyes could see only the fight before him as a bitter truth cut into his pride. "I can't get between them." Even if he tried to help Frey, he could barely track their movements. "If I step in now, death is all that's waiting for me." Gladiator had become a monster far beyond their grasp, a monster who could kill Snow Lionheart with ease. That is SSS, a rank you simply cannot oppose unless you wield power of the same order. Snow didn't have it, and neither yet did Frey. Yet even so, he was still standing against Gladiator, still holding out. Snow clenched his fist, teeth grinding, furious at himself, at his own weakness. The human path, the demonic path. He tried so desperately that he even ate the flesh of his own kind to grow stronger, and it worked. But that strength looked pitiful beside what raged before his eyes now. Just, what the hell do I have to pay to reach power like that? What must he sacrifice? What exactly must he do? Snow didn't know. That ignorance, his weakness, hurt him most. All he could do was watch, helpless, as his friend fought a monster whose might defied human sense. Frey was alone, and he knew it. From the beginning, Frey Starlight had relied on no one but himself, and nothing had changed. He fought every battle with the strength he forged by his own hands, nothing else. Power he had paid dearly for, suffering even more to claim. And now he stood against Joseph Gladiator, who had sacrificed millions to reach where he stood. It was a grueling fight. Blow by blow, Frey Starlight was losing ground, damage piling up without end. Boom! Spear and swords crashed again, Gladiator pressing Frey harder and harder. "What good is this miserable struggle of yours, Frey Starlight?" Boom! Another hit, Frey staggered farther back. "You clearly can't defeat me. You can't even wound me, nor pierce this great shield tempered by the souls of millions." Boom! "Why keep fighting to deny the inevitable? In the end you'll die, just like every fool who ever dared stand against the Church of Purification." Gladiator kept talking, until Frey answered with an even greater surge of shadow aura. "I told you, you talk too much," Frey said. Gladiator's eyes flared white. "You're right. There's no need for words anymore." His aura poured thicker, gathering at his spear's tip, and he unleashed a roaring beam of holy light straight into Frey's face, a torrent that erased the entire upper half of his body. down to exposed flesh and bone. Bladier's power kept swelling. He was finally starting to master his new might. He lunged again, and Fry did the same. Half a body of meat and bone. Fry still attacked, ignoring his wounds and forcing his limbs to move by sheer shadow adaptation. Boom! The battle was on another plane entirely, a level Fry had never faced. This is SSS, the opening step into the absolute power his deadliest enemies wielded. I have to hold. Boom! Another explosion tore Fry apart further, and the ground with him. I have to hold, he whispered, forcing his body to move again. If I fall to him, how can I even dream of facing the monsters beyond? Bladier was the trial, the wall Fry had to cross, whatever it cost. His foe was the weakest of SSS, freshly broken through, by crooked means that might make him less than others of the same rank. If Fry Starlight couldn't endure here, there was no point in going on. The fight dragged on. Bladier's patience thinned. Feeding more power into his colossal spear, he swatted Fry away yet again. Then, gathering everything, raised his weapon to the heavens. Let me show you the true power of a sovereign. Bladier's body blazed. The sky itself split as if he'd opened a gate to another world. From that rift, a titanic spear took shape, its girth blotting out the entire island. Packed with SSS-ranked aura, the kind only a handful in history had ever witnessed. One annihilating strike, enough to erase the city of eternal night. Bladier aimed it squarely at Fry, intent on erasing him outright. Fry stared up for a heartbeat, stunned. Then clenched his teeth, every muscle drawing taut as he raised Valerian, the Black Terror, to meet the falling spear. All of it. Every last drop of aura in me. Every grain of strength, every shard of the being called Fry Starlight. He poured into the attack that would carry all of him. Within that young body, an aura also classed as SSS surged, equal to Bladier's, perhaps even beyond. He cut upward in a vertical arc to meet the spear, unleashing the strongest strike in his arsenal. 10,000 steps of shadow, Fry Starlight style. Nameless judgment. It was a terrifying technique. No matter how many times he unleashed it, it never lost its splendor in the eyes of those who saw it. Unleashing it at its fullest, Fry sent Nameless Judgment crashing head-on into the colossal spear. A vast vertical slash swallowed space itself, and threatened to swallow the spear with it. Light aura and dark aura clashed again, but this time on a wholly different plane. The impact of those titanic forces hurled out shockwaves that shook not only the island, but the wide sea around it. Across the planet called Earth, sensitives felt the flood of aura, unable to comprehend what was happening in that distant corner of the world. The collision was immense, but this time the darkness overran the light. Nameless Judgment shattered the spear completely, then detonated in the sky in a breathtaking bloom that left every onlooker gaping. Even Bladier hadn't expected Fry to repel a full power strike. Seizing that instant of shock, Fry tore through the veiling storm of aura and appeared before Bladier, forcing his battered body forward. This was his one opening, his single chance to wound the foe whose defenses he hadn't pierced since the fight began. Face to face, at point-blank range, Fry Starlight swung Dark Sister, drawing more and more from the ocean of aura within him. I've never poured out this much aura in my life. He had pushed himself too far, but this enemy left him no choice. He had used Nameless Judgment once against a war angel, and again now against Bladier. Twice should have been the limit. Any more and his body would break beyond battle-worthiness. But against an opponent of this tier, Fry knew he had to break his limits to have even a single chance. Drinking the very air from around him, Fry let loose a thunderous war cry and cleaved for Bladier as the latter raised his shield. Another strike into which Fry Starlight emptied everything he had. Nameless Judgment. Slosh! With a third Nameless Judgment, he split the world again, engulfing Bladier in that torrent of overwhelming aura. The blow distilled Fry Starlight's story to this point, the peak of the offensive power he had reached in his life. A terrifying strike that could reach even those of SSS class. From within the violet darkness, Frey's eyes stayed locked on his foe, waiting for the result of his struggle and all the pain till now. He didn't wait long. Out of the ruin and shadow, Bladier emerged again. He still blazed with dazzling holy light, unbroken. But this time, his great shield was finally gone, dissolving into the air. And the left arm that had borne it was destroyed, obliterated by nameless judgment. He had hurt him for the first time, but it wasn't nearly enough. His enemy still stood, ready to fight. All that, just to cost me a single arm, Bladier said, a deep voice edged with anger, eyes flaring at Fry Starlight. Fry panted hard, fighting not to collapse. Congratulations. You managed to wound me and break my shield. Are you pleased, Fry Starlight? Your power reached me. I who stand here after sacrificing millions of souls. Bladier glanced at the ruined limb, then dismissed it. With a surge of blinding light, he renewed it, shaping a new arm from pure aura. You don't seem capable of giving more than that, Fry Starlight. It seems you've hit your limit. Step by step, Bladier advanced, colossal spear in hand. Time to end this. The battle had entered its final phase. Fry Starlight had poured out everything in his arsenal, yet still couldn't defeat his foe. Bladier had finally taken real damage, but it was so trivial he erased it at once. Between the two, the tide swung harshly against Fry Starlight, who neared defeat. His mind raced for any escape. The longer the fight dragged on, the clearer the gulf became, the gulf between his strength and that of the monsters who belonged to that legendary class. Between Fry Starlight and Joseph Bladier, under the eyes of those watching from afar, the war against the church moved into its last act, poised to end at last. In Nocthera's lightless sky, titanic forces clashed in a grueling duel that threatened to tear the island apart. The Golden World Tree shivered without cease, its radiance swelling with every collision between Bladier and Fry, as if it were trying to say something, to mourn what humanity had become. A frail race battered by calamity. Not only do enemies far stronger than they loom beyond the horizon, but humans slaughter one another to the last, long before the true foe even arrives. Even without the demons, mankind would still wage war upon itself. Such is the fractured, chaotic nature they were born with. And the fight between Bladier and Fry was the perfect example. The young lord and prodigy of House Starlight found himself in a brutal bind. Even his strongest strikes couldn't bring his opponent down. Only nameless judgment had managed to wound him. Frey's other blows simply couldn't harm an SSS-class combatant, one with terrifying durability and explosive power. But unlike the other techniques of the 10,000 Steps of Shadow, Fry couldn't fling out nameless judgment without limit. He'd already used it 3 times. There was no room for a fourth. It was, by any measure, the worst possible position for Fry, yet still he fought on. His black blades met Bladier's spear again and again, as many times as it took. The two of them raced around the island at the speed of light, carving trails of aura and ruin behind them. Explosions never stopped, and with every clash Fry Starlight reappeared bearing heavier wounds. Bladier was overwhelming him at this stage, yet Frey's body kept knitting itself back together, refusing to leave the fight no matter how hard Bladier tried to end it. The battle dragged on, and the High Bishop's patience thinned. He pressed harder, drawing ever more catastrophic power from the multitude of souls burning within him. As the duel stretched and he unleashed his full might, Bladier began to grasp, bit by bit, the power of the throne beyond existence, the first stage of SSS class. With a whip-fast thrust of his spear, Bladier sent a thunderous surge of light aura roaring forward, an aura that eclipsed Frey's and blew a gaping crater through his chest. The hit was savage, hurling Fry away, but he righted himself midair, set his feet, and stood again. Panting, he focused his aura around the ghastly hole in his chest, then blasted off the ground and lunged back at Bladier with everything he had. They traded, each trying to swallow the other whole. The cadence turned frantic. The fight grew almost incomprehensible. With a flick of his spear, Bladier sheared off the arm that held Dark Sister, and Fry didn't even flinch. He booted the severed hand and blade straight at Bladier, attacking in that mangled state. The hand caromed off the spear, an attack too paltry to harm him, but Fry vaulted over Bladier, snatched the hand midair, and reattached it as if it were nothing. His regeneration was monstrous, inhuman. The instant his arm was back, Fry spun in the sky and came down with both swords. Bladier raised his spear to guard. The weight of the overhead blow drove his feet deep into the earth. With a sharp sweep of the shaft, he knocked Fry away and flipped the exchange on its head again. Bladier's thrusts came in a blur, and Fry could barely keep pace now. Yes, the great shield Bladier had used earlier was gone, but Fry still couldn't land a telling hit. With each passing second, Fry understood more keenly the true gulf between ranks, and how towering SSS class stood over all others. Fry Starlight was an outlier, his power already acknowledged as beyond SS+, but it had not yet reached SSS. The gap was massive. "I think I'm starting to understand this power," Bladier said, tightening the vise. He had only just broken through and hadn't fully fathomed what was at his command. But, step by step, he was mastering it, shedding the old mindset of an SS-class fighter and adopting a style befitting his new plane. He poured out a vast tide of aura. Light swathed his body and then expanded to a terrifying scale, and Frey's eyes widened at what took shape. Formation Tower of God. The words fell like a curse from the heavens. The instant he spoke them, a colossal hand manifested from nothing and smashed Fry Starlight flat, grinding him into the earth. The strike covered a staggering span, the island itself quaking under the pressure. Worse, the hand wasn't alone. From behind Bladier, light aura gathered into a towering giant that blotted out the sky. The giant wore armor echoing Bladier's own. Fry Starlight rose from the crater that hand had punched into the land and stared at the thing for a long second. Bladier walked toward him at a measured pace, and the giant followed in lockstep. Each footfall sent violent tremors through the ground, and the aura packed into that colossus was so extreme it looked like a walking sun. Bladier leveled his spear, and in the same instant, the giant leveled its own and brought it crashing down toward Fry Starlight. Another annihilating blow, poised to crush him. Boom! The titanic spear slammed down and shook the earth. Bladier narrowed his eyes at the impact point. His enemy wasn't there. Fry had vanished, reappearing high above, over the giant itself, using his blink once more. The colossus tilted its head up, its eyes blazing with a pure white light, tracking him. Fry dropped from the sky at breakneck speed. The giant lifted its hand to swat him from existence. From afar, Fry looked infinitesimal next to that behemoth, an ant daring a monster that eclipsed it in size and might. But Fry was anything but ordinary. From within his body, aura surged without end, detonating against the giant. Violet fissures crawled across Frey's flesh as the aura tried to tear him apart, blowing everything around him to pieces. He drew a deep breath and let out a battle cry that seemed to ignite his very being. Ignition! He detonated his own aura, his annihilating technique, a nuclear-scale blast whose radius was so vast it swallowed the giant whole. The radiant beast vanished inside a pillar of shadow aura. Even under that ferocity, the colossus resisted, trying to crush Fry and hurl the blast back. Fry had no choice but to push harder, far harder. More violet fractures laced his body. Ignition! He triggered it again. Fry doubled the aura he burned to erase the giant. The column of darkness swelled wider and wider, climbing into the sky. The explosion was monstrous, trapping both Fry and the giant within. At last, after what felt like an eternity, the darkness peeled back and revealed the result. Having poured out everything, Fry destroyed the colossus by harnessing the SSS-class aura within him through the doubled ignition. Still standing, he hurled himself at Bladier below, trying to injure him as well. But the High Bishop turned him aside with ease and re-engaged. It happened again and again. Fry fell over and over, suffering every kind of wound. Yet each time he rose, relying wholly on his monstrous regeneration. Little by little, the shape of the battle became clear to those watching from afar. Aegon was the first to turn to Callistus behind him. Get ready, Callistus. We're leaving, the prince said, turning his back on the fight. The move drew Snow's attention. Moments earlier, the aftershocks nearly killed them, but the Golden World Tree had shielded them, making their spot the only place in all of Nocthera untouched by the duel. Where do you think you're going? Snow asked, stunned that Aegon Valyrian meant to retreat before the battle was even decided. Aegon answered at once. There's no point in staying. Fry Starlight has already lost. What? Snow didn't buy it. The fight was still raging, and Fry hadn't fallen. To Snow's eyes his friend was still on his feet. But Aegon saw much further. Frey spent his entire arsenal and unleashed his strongest moves. Yet he couldn't bring his opponent down. What he's doing now is nothing but futile stalling. Look at Bladier. He isn't even speaking anymore. He's no longer who he was. He's the result of millions of souls fused into one. And that aggregate is what's moving now. It isn't wrong to say he's no longer the bishop you knew. As Aegon spoke, Fry was blasted away again, his body riddled with bloody craters. He nearly hit the ground. His foe approached at an agonizing crawl, giving him time to regenerate and stand again. Bladier's undergone an explosive surge of power. He's using Fry to master it. He knows there are very few on this planet who can face him now, so he's drawing the fight out on purpose, testing his new strength and seeing how far he can go. That's why he hadn't finished Fry with a single sweeping strike, opting instead to cycle through varied attacks, like the colossal giant from before. Fry is strong, and his reality-defying abilities are what let him slay foes above his rank. But his opponent has stepped into a realm you can't contest with tricks alone. The souls Bladier absorbed hadn't only boosted his might. His temperament seemed altered as well. He was calmer, sharper. He could steer the field for the best possible outcomes. The current Bladier was, without question, a genuine threat to both the Empire and the Ultras, strong enough to stand against them alone. Fry Starlight was the Empire's greatest hope, but even he could do little before SSS-class power, and that made Bladier Aegon's top priority. Here and now, though, the prince had few options. Fry has lost. There's no sense staying, Snow Lionheart. I suggest you withdraw as well, Aegon said. Snow flatly refused. I don't understand you, Aegon. If Fry falls here, what's the point of running? With what do you plan to face Bladier? Snow drew Vermithor. I'm not fleeing and leaving him behind. I'd rather die on that field than run while he throws his life away for mine. Snow Lionheart hadn't stepped in yet because he saw himself as a burden to Fry in this fight. But now that Fry was flagging badly, there was no reason left for Snow to stay back. If I push the War King's form to its limit, I might at least open a gap. Fighting together and trying to survive, that was far better than running and leaving Fry to battle alone. Aegon didn't like that plan at all. Fry won't die, Snow. Sure, Bladier's stronger, but that doesn't mean Fry can't escape if he wants to, the prince said, stressing a point Snow knew well. Don't forget he can blink across continental distances whenever he chooses. I doubt Bladier can stop him. If he's truly cornered, he'll bail. When that happens, staying here will be the end of us. Aegon smiled, already turning to leave. And let me remind you what he told you before he fight Bladier. He told you to get out with the Saintess, didn't he? I suggest you move soon, dear Snow. Aegon and Callistus slipped away, vanishing from sight, leaving Snow Lionheart with Uriel Blatini unconscious beside him. He can run whenever he wants, Snow repeated under his breath, turning to the distant duel where Fry was still fighting. Aegon's logic was sound. Fry could blink away the moment death loomed. But for some reason, Snow didn't believe Fry would. He's used Nameless Judgment Ignition, every lethal tool he has, and none of it worked. If Fry were going to run, he should have done it the moment his strongest weapons failed to reach Bladier. Yet despite that failure, he kept hurling himself forward, refusing to yield, attacking a foe who outclassed him again and again. Nothing about the way Fry Starlight fought suggested retreat. If anything, he looked like he'd choose death first. What Snow saw in his friend made him doubt Aegon's claim. However logical the prince sounded, reality said otherwise. Fry won't run. I'm sure of it. Snow was ready to bet everything on that, on his instincts and the long, hard-won understanding of the comrade he'd fought beside so many times. So Snow Lionheart readied himself to join the battle, to try, at least, to help. He had just set his first step toward the field when the girl behind him stirred for the first time since she'd fallen. Startled, Snow turned. Drawn by the thunder of distant explosions, Uriel Blatini finally woke, pain written across her face. She wore nothing but the golden coat Snow had draped over her earlier, which left much of her body exposed. Skin defaced by blood runes and by the scars the embedded tubes had left behind. Uriel. At first she was lost, unable to make sense of where she was. Snow Lionheart stood in front of her. A savage battle raged behind him. The ground trembled every heartbeat, the air itself taut with menace. She understood none of it at first. The pain was blinding, and her last clear memory was a fading smear, being forced to begin that cursed rite that would transfer the Saintess's power into her. The rite that had killed the previous Saintess, Yuasha, the woman who'd been like an elder sister to her, and left Uriel naked in the spring while blood, mixed with sacred water, was pumped into her. The rite that had left her body as twisted as it was now. Then, little by little, new memories flooded in. Memories that made the poor girl lift trembling hands to her ruined face. "What have I done?" she whispered, terrified by what she remembered. "What did I do?" Panic crashed over Uriel. She clutched her face so hard she gouged it with her nails. She couldn't stop. Images poured through her. Uriel had been directly linked to every angel circling the world, and she'd seen everything through their eyes. She saw how millions died in answer to her own words. She realized she had caused all those deaths, had exploited their blind faith and directly midwifed the monster Fry Starlight was now fighting. Uriel had always been the type to bear pain alone, to hide it deep and show the world nothing but her gentle smile. But this time she couldn't hide it. The pain was immense. The guilt, greater. Uriel shattered, sobbing as the faces of those who'd sacrificed themselves in obedience to her words surged up to meet her. "No! No!" she screamed, bursting into tears as her nails raked bloody furrows across her beautiful face. Snow grabbed her, stopping her before she could hurt herself further, shouting for her to get a hold of herself. It was no use. The memories kept streaming in, and Uriel was forced to carry a guilt no girl like her could possibly bear. Even if it hadn't been her will, it didn't change the fact that she had been the cause of those millions of deaths, and the direct reason Bladier had become what he was. A monster who might soon kill Fry Starlight, and countless more besides. Realizing all of that, Uriel wept blood as fresh cuts opened across her face. It was a moment of total collapse. Uriel screamed her grief and pain at the top of her lungs, but her voice was a whisper beneath the explosions still rolling out from the fight. In the end, Snow managed to stop her from hurting herself any further, clinging to her, scared she might try to end her own life. Beneath the world tree, which kept shuddering overhead, the hero and the Saintess sat together before the tableau of death and ruin Fry and Bladier had painted. Those two had been trading blows for a long time now, and the battle refused to end. Every time Fry fell, he rose and went back at Bladier. But even Frey's monstrous regeneration had limits. He dropped to one knee, chest heaving, fighting just to drag in a breath. Breathing itself had become a task. All around him lay nothing but the wreckage of his desperate struggle to hold Bladier at bay. Bladier stood before him, looking down. "Seems you've reached your limit," Bladier said evenly. Fry let out a hollow laugh. "Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet." He tried to stand again, bracing on his swords, clawing up whatever strength was left to force his body upright. He made it back to his feet, but the fight looked finished. Aside from the arm Fry had taken and Bladier had regrown, the High Priest was essentially unscathed, while Fry was a ruin. Fry Starlight had given Bladier a world of trouble. It wouldn't have been strange for Bladier to kill him on the spot. Yet, against expectation, Bladier remained perfectly calm. "To be honest with you, Fry Starlight, I'm grateful. Because of you, I've learned to handle the power that's been granted to me." Bladier raised a hand toward the sky, admiring a body ripened by a might he'd never dreamed of. This is the perfect form befitting a ruler, the overwhelming force that can accomplish anything. I wouldn't have reached it without the pressure you put on me. You even fought me as an equal for a time, forcing me to draw out everything. But it seems you can't push me any further, not in that pathetic state. He took a single step. The pressure of it alone drove Fry back to one knee. I see no reason to keep you alive. You'll die now, but be proud, at least you're truly strong. The strongest I've faced. Your praise means nothing to me, so keep it in your pocket. Fry sneered, straining against the crushing pressure. Staring at the maddened high priest, Fry realized Bladier was no longer the same man. His very nature had changed, as if the millions of souls inside him had reshaped what he was. He'd become something beyond, colder, more composed, thinking past the human range. A nightmare of an opponent, one who would make them all suffer if he lived. This was the first SSS-class foe Fry had ever faced. He had always assumed the first would be a demon. Fate had other ideas. The opponent he'd waited for turned out to be human. The fight made the gap brutally clear. Bladier was likely the weakest SSS alive, and still, Frey's weapons and trump cards had amounted to almost nothing. All that struggle, all that hard-won power, had bought him a single severed arm. That was the ceiling. The difference between SS Plus and SSS was absurd, two different worlds entirely. No amount of skill erased that gulf. You can't defeat an SSS-class combatant except with another SSS. There was a reason that absolute rule existed. Everyone in this world lived by it. Fry was no exception. And yet, even at the edge, Fry refused to bow to the logic of this world. Long ago he'd chosen to defy fate itself, to break any law that tried to shackle him. So he stood again. And fought again. Bladier intended to kill him, and took his time about it after realizing Fry couldn't win. Then he paused. Frowning as aura began to surge from Frey's body once more. Before Bladier's eyes, power poured out of Fry and rose above him, condensing into a sphere of pure violet. A sun that kept swelling until its shadow fell over Bladier himself. This power! Bladier murmured, genuinely surprised. He hadn't expected his broken opponent to have something like this left. In front of him, Fry Starlight forced himself upright and kept feeding aura into that growing star. A raging violet sun whose pressure made even Bladier flinch. I had been saving this technique for the day I'd be forced to fight Zabar and Geppetto. It's still incomplete, but it seems I have no choice but to wager everything on it now. Fry clearly struggled to control whatever he was building. Gaps opened all through his stance and flow. Bladier had every chance to strike him down before the technique was complete. But he chose to wait, curious to witness his enemy's final weapon. What now, Fry Starlight? Planning to throw that at me? Bladier asked, real interest in his voice. The sun's pressure was truly frightening. Even he felt a prickle of fear. But his confidence in the power born of millions of sacrifices was absolute. So he deliberately let Fry finish, eager for one more clash. By now, most of Frey's SSS-class aura was crammed into that ravening star, the full reserve he had never been able to wield at once. He had only recently found a way to haul all of it out of a body that still couldn't properly channel it. Having fought him, Fry expected Bladier not to interfere. The High Priest saw this battle as a chance to master a strength he believed would place him atop the world. So Fry wagered everything on this technique. Bladier gathered himself to meet it head-on. But Fry never hurled it at him. Sorry, Fry said with a thin laugh, drawing a deep breath. It doesn't work like that. And before Bladier, and every watcher from afar, Fry Starlight finished externalizing his aura, and then threw it with all his might. Not at his foe, but at himself. In a baffling scene none of them understood. Least of all Bladier. Fry let the violet sun swallow him whole, erasing his body from existence. At the peak of his battle against Bladier, the man wielding the strength of 35 million souls, Fry Starlight found himself outmatched, unable to triumph over the monster his foe had become. He had no choice but to gamble on a new technique he hadn't even finished. Under Bladier's puzzled stare, the colossal violet sun of aura that had even made the Archbishop flinch swallowed its maker whole in a scene as shocking as it was inexplicable. Did he lose control and erase himself with his own attack? Bladier muttered, baffled by what he'd seen. That violet aura sun was vast, its contained power in no way inferior to his own. Bladier fully expected Frey's next strike to be a genuine threat. Instead, the opposite happened. There was no way Fry could survive a disaster like that. The sun should have obliterated him. With no other explanation at hand, Bladier assumed Fry had lost control and died by the very technique he'd created. But then the aura sun shuddered hard, and he realized that wasn't it at all. Slowly, steadily, the sun began to shrink. From a world-eclipsing sphere that blanketed half the island, down and down again. The SSS-class aura sun kept contracting as if squeezed by an invisible vice, until it was smaller than Bladier himself. And when it reached that size, the Archbishop froze at the sight of Fry Starlight still intact. Hands braced around the violet sphere, compressing it tighter and tighter. He's still intact, even after burying himself beneath the weight of that thing. Bladier muttered, unable to comprehend what was happening. Fry had slammed the aura sun into himself, then compressed it until what hovered above his palm was no longer a star, but a tiny, dense body. No, he didn't stop there. He pressed it further, forcing it into an even smaller size as veins roped across his skin and his body screamed to withstand the pressure. It might have been small now, but it was still that same violet sun. Still carrying the same explosive might. Size was the only difference. Somehow, Fry had squeezed it down to a minuscule sphere. A violet sun no bigger than a baseball floated above his trembling palm. He dropped to one knee, grinning despite himself as he fought to catch his breath, clearly pleased with the little violet baseball he'd forged. What are you trying to achieve with this, Fry Starlight? What kind of technique are you even attempting? Bladier's curiosity was genuine. He wanted to see how far Fry would push this. Fry exhaled long and slow, then forced himself upright again. I really need to work on the timing. My enemies won't hand me this much prep time, he said. Just readying it had taken an eternity. Time Bladier could have used to take his head in less than a second. But the Archbishop hadn't. Bladier, you're absolutely certain you can take whatever I throw at you, aren't you? That's why you let me finish. Because you want to use me to master the power you gained by burning millions of souls. Fry said, lifting the aura sphere to his face. Don't regret that decision later. And with that, he took the tiny, volatile sun and swallowed it whole, deepening Bladier's confusion, only for the Archbishop to be denied even a second to think. The instant the sphere vanished down his throat, Fry howled, a raw, tearing sound, as a cataclysmic force erupted inside him, threatening to rip him apart. Frey's veins, his aura channels, even his blood blazed with a savage violet light. The pressure alone should have shredded him into dust. That power is destroying his body, Bladier observed. Yet at that same murderous pace, another force was knitting the damage back together just as quickly. Driving shadow adaptation to its limit, Frey's monstrous regeneration fought to keep him in one piece. You felt it before, didn't you, Bladier? Fry shouted, eyes blazing, hair igniting with that ominous violet sheen. That aura was SSS class. The same tier you reached after all your sacrifices. They weren't equals in every respect, but Frey's aura itself at least matched Bladier's. It was the one SSS class thing Fry possessed. Phase 3 of shadow adaptation gave me total control over my aura, but this body can't output all of it at once. My foundation is still too weak. Even techniques like ignition or nameless judgment, which burned terrifying amounts of aura, had never expelled everything. No matter what he used, he couldn't empty the well. So Fry abandoned the idea of venting it through attacks. There was no technique that could burn all of it in one go, and even if there were, his body couldn't fire it. That was why he conceived this insane method. A technique that fused multiple abilities and concepts at once. Using Phase 3 of shadow adaptation to exert perfect control, he extracted every drop of SSS-class aura in his body and shaped it into a colossal sun. The pressure was monstrous. the same pressure Snow Lionheart had sensed while searching for him before. Then, through immaculate control, he compressed that star into something infinitesimal, like a nuclear core ready to detonate at the slightest touch. Keeping it stable demanded obscene precision, never mind the next, even madder step. He swallowed that black hole, forcing it back into his body. Frey's flesh had always refused to output all that SSS-class aura, because he lacked the foundation to release it. So he changed the equation. If his body couldn't emit it, then he would contain it, weaponize it from the inside. For that reason, Frey forced his body to accept the aura by brute force, detonating it inside himself. A suicidal move like that should have erased him from existence the instant he attempted it, but Phase 2 of Shadow Adaptation prevented that outcome. Driving his monstrous regeneration to the limit, Frey Starlight rebuilt his body as fast as it was being destroyed, somehow keeping himself in one piece. His current state was perilous, and he had no idea how long he could maintain it. Regeneration wasn't infinite. A few minutes at best. But within that brief window, Frey entered a wholly extraordinary state. One that let his body annihilate everything except the aura within, leaving that power to circulate unimpeded. I didn't live to see your whole journey, but I'd wager this is what you did in your time, Father. He smiled through the strain. Frey drew all that explosive aura into himself and brought it entirely under his command. His body burned with a dark radiance. This was how he emulated the power he had once heard of and glimpsed in the distant past. The absolute manipulator's ability, said to shatter the world's limits and embody pure chaos. This is only a cheap imitation, a temporary mimic that grants a similar effect for a few minutes. But for those few minutes, I feel like I can do anything. He drew a deep breath and tightened his grip on both swords. He whispered the name of his new technique. 10,000 steps of shadow, dark ascension. A dark ascension. Frey Starlight set foot into another world of power, the kind he needed to subdue his enemies. The pressure pouring off him now was terrifying. Bladier couldn't believe what he was seeing. His opponent had somehow closed the gap, reaching a level comparable to his own. Impossible, Bladier murmured, trying to deny even his heightened senses. To reach his current realm, Bladier had needed to sacrifice millions of souls just to plant one foot in the first stage of SSS. Yet his foe had approached similar might through a single, unfathomable technique. Let's begin, Frey shouted, fighting to hold together and finish it quickly. This form wouldn't last long. Bladier gathered his full power, ready for whatever Frey would hurl at him. There's no reason to fear him, he assured himself. Even with his tricks, he can't erase the difference in tiers. The SSS rank isn't something you beat with gimmicks. Frey is no exception. That was how it should have gone. In the blink of an eye, Frey vanished and reappeared right in front of him. An untraceable instant teleport, face to face. Wreathed in that eerie violet aura, Frey Starlight struck with both blades, unleashing everything his state would allow. Bladier answered with a light-speed thrust of his spear, and moments later, the two powers collided, igniting a roar of auras more dreadful than any before. Light wrestled with darkness as they locked into a tug-of-war, each trying to crush the other with raw force, an exchange whose caliber sat squarely at SSS. Those long seconds felt like hours. Then everyone on the island heard it, the savage rip of cutting power. Slash! Bladier couldn't believe it until Frey slid past him, piercing his guard to appear behind his back. A vast, X-shaped gash opened across Bladier's chest. Feeling the blood-wet wound from that last exchange, he realized he'd lost the aura struggle. For the first time since the battle began, darkness had smothered light, and Frey's blade had reached him. His first clean hit since Nameless Judgment. Did I just lose a straight contest of power? Refusing to accept it, Bladier flared even more aura and whirled on Frey. Light artillery. He fired an overwhelming shell of pure light, a blast meant to swallow Frey and everything around him. Frey answered instantly, whipping his swords with absolute force. 10,000 steps of shadow, Black Severer. Two ebon arcs carved into the oncoming barrage. Bracing through the deluge, Frey drove forward again, intent on cutting deeper this time. Boom! Steel met spear once more, their blows trading at speeds beyond human comprehension. In this new state, Fry blazed like a star, outshining even Bladier's light. Yet that very power gnawed at him from within. Dark Ascension was tearing his body apart. Shadow Adaptation was knitting it back together at the same pace, a civil war inside his flesh that kept him from focusing perfectly on the fight. My body could eject me from this form any minute. I have to end this now. His thoughts raced as he kept pressing. Flawed and incomplete as it was, the ability had done its job. It let Fry Starlight temporarily stand on equal ground with his foe. It made him the exception, let him chase a miracle and break the rule. Frey's blade was breaking through to Bladier with every exchange. Bladier landed blows of his own, but that didn't change the simple fact. The fight had tipped into the unknown. No one could tell who would come out on top now. Don't get conceited, Fry Starlight. You are not my equal in any sense. Bladier roared, shaking the ground with a colossal surge of light. Fry met the wave head-on, carving through it with his swords. 10,000 steps of shadow, black meteor. Shadow aura threaded between the particles of light, and Frey's blades smashed into the spear again, leaving a deep mark. He had no luxury to answer Bladier's taunts. Every shred of focus was locked on maintaining his new form for as long as possible. Damn it! This cursed state is draining nearly all of my concentration just to hold it together. I can barely focus on the fight. Boom! Like this, I can't fire any supreme art. I'll be forced to rely on the foundational forms of 10,000 steps of shadow. A fresh spike of pain hammered behind his eyes. That was why he hadn't unleashed any grand techniques against Bladier so far. Dark Ascension let him output, miraculously, something comparable to an SSS combatant's raw might, enough to withstand Bladier and even cut him. But to finish the High Priest, Fry needed a single, overwhelming strike, something that would erase Bladier outright. Surface wounds would never be enough. The ordinary forms of 10,000 steps of shadow couldn't do that. So Fry pushed himself harder, reaching for something greater. A single annihilating blow to wipe his enemy from existence. Strike after strike, he parried everything Bladier hurled at him while gathering power, waiting for the one opening. The battlefield became an ocean of detonating aura. Nothing about the fight was readable anymore. Bladier slipped into absolute frenzy, the millions of souls inside him howling as he wrenched out every shred of the power gifted to him. He was a natural disaster, flooding the world with light in his bid to kill his foe. Fry endured the deluge. Dim as he looked beside Bladier's radiance, he still turned back that aggression with ruthless efficiency. What are you, Fry Starlight? Are you telling me you alone can manifest power equal to millions of souls? Bladier raged, fraying as Fry survived everything he threw. Fry Starlight's gifts had always defied reason, but Bladier had never imagined they would let his opponent reach the same plane. It was nonsense. This was SSS. Fry didn't stop there. He answered in a voice that cut deeper than Bladier's. Equal? No. I'll surpass it. He chased the moment, hemming Bladier in beneath a torrent of blows that finally tore open the High Priest's guard. Face to face, Fry gambled everything on the next attack. He knew he couldn't hold the state much longer. He would stake it all on one last strike. The only technique in my arsenal that can end Bladier outright is Nameless Judgment. Nothing else. If I unleash it in this state, it'll be far stronger than before. Nameless Judgment under Dark Ascension. Together, the result wouldn't be hard to imagine. Catastrophic power, enough to crush even Bladier. That was the bet Fry Starlight made. I've already exceeded my limit and used it 3 times. Under normal circumstances, I can't fire Nameless Judgment again. But like this, I feel like I can do anything. He pressed harder, step by step cutting through the light and erasing the distance. Bladier tried everything to stop him. Fry bore it all down to the final breath. I can do it! He roared with everything he had, overwhelming his foe. I'll end this, here and now. Face to face with Bladier, Fry Starlight poured everything into Balerion, the Black Terror, preparing to unleash his strongest strike. His battle cry split the air, and dread needled the high priest's heart. As Fry hewed downward in a vertical cut meant to finish it all, the peak of his power, the pinnacle of his craft, focused into a single final blow. Bladier couldn't stop him. The aura Fry had gathered made the high priest's heart sink, recognizing the disaster about to befall him. Even with all those countless sacrificed souls, the specter of defeat still clung to Bladier, and for a heartbeat, fear tangled his thoughts. He, the supposed superior in every way, found himself under Fry Starlight's mercy. But reality was different. Grinding himself past the brink, wrestling through blinding pain, Fry unleashed it a fourth time. 10,000 steps of shadow, Fry Starlight style. Nameless judgment. A strike greater than any before, enough to rattle the world itself. A stroke that set death's shadow upon Bladier and made terror seize him, if only for an instant. An attack like that would erase him from existence. That much was almost certain. That blow would, in all likelihood, end the battle. That was what should have happened. But fate had other ideas, and in the end, the unimaginable occurred. Fry Starlight was a heartbeat away from unleashing the greatest nameless judgment of his life. The instant he raised his sword toward Bladier to hurl it at him, time stalled for a breath, and Fry felt his reality flip upside down. His vision went scarlet, and a horrific scene followed. Blood burst in torrents from his eyes, his nose, and his mouth. His muscles convulsed grotesquely, and his skin cracked like a stone statue shattered by brutal force. Fry Starlight crashed toward the ground as Dark Sister slipped from his hand, while Balerion remained bound to him. Yet that blade now weighed a ton to the broken Fry, who had collapsed worse than ever before. Eyes wide open, Fry stared at the ground beneath him, unable to comprehend what had just happened to him. He felt his body being torn apart without end, pain flooding him like hell itself. A hell unlike anything he had ever known. This was the price of trying to mimic a power beyond his understanding, a technique unfinished, and on top of that, forcing himself past his limit to unleash nameless judgment for the fourth time. Fry had put too much faith in his body and its regeneration, pushing far, far past the boundary, past the point of no return. His opponent was SSS class, and the damage that opponent had inflicted was unlike anything Fry had experienced in his entire life. "You've got to be kidding me." Fry spat blood, his expression darkening. Only a few seconds and a single strike had stood between him and annihilating his foe. If he had executed it properly, he might have won the battle. But his body failed before he could. Fry clenched his teeth, trying to rise and make another attempt. But the slightest movement in his current state sent every fiber of his being trembling with agony beyond human endurance. That was from a tiny motion, let alone fighting. Bladier, standing before him, had also lost his senses for a few seconds. Even he had envisioned himself being hit by that attack. The aura he felt at the end was terrifying. Terrifying enough to freeze him where he stood for a time, before his eyes returned to Fry, now kneeling before him. From the very start, Bladier had never once felt he could lose. He had controlled the fight from the beginning and had many chances to destroy Fry. One could even say he'd drawn the battle out on purpose, using his opponent to push himself toward even greater power. If that proved anything, it was that Bladier was far stronger than Fry. And yet, at the end of the battle, for the first time, Bladier felt the specter of death draw near. The possibility of defeat, which hadn't existed at all, suddenly stood so close that Bladier froze for long seconds, unable to process what had happened. But luck still favored him, even after his opponent had revealed one impossible power after another. Powers that defied logic and shattered limits. Fry still could not defeat him. Fry collapsed completely before delivering the finishing blow, and that put him back under Bladier's mercy. Bladier kept silent for a while, staring at his opponent with eyes that held a tangle of complicated emotions. As for Fry, his body trembled, losing a frightening amount of blood as he tried to stand. To no avail. Fry cursed again and again, refusing to accept the result. One attack. All that stood between me and beating him was a single attack. You could have fallen after that, Damn you! He cursed with all his heart. But in this state, there was nothing he could do. Before him, Bladier lifted his great spear, aiming to end him. He said nothing. He refused to speak to him. After what he had seen, the bishop knew Fry Starlight was not someone who should be left alive. Not for even a second. Who knew when he might unveil yet another power beyond comprehension? There was nothing to do but kill him. Frey's regeneration had halted after all the strain he'd endured. Taking a hit in this condition would be a true catastrophe, one that could cost him his life. Fry knew that, and so did Bladier. Around them, the island, vast and immense, had become nothing but a ruined land choked with rubble. It was no longer a paradise, and just as Bladier moved in to finish Fry, a pillar of light descended, swallowing both Bladier and Fry alike, shaking the island yet again. Grand Cosmos Formation. At the last possible moment, Snow Lionheart intervened, unleashing his strongest strike at Bladier while grabbing Frey's body to pull him out of danger at once. Everything that had happened made him realize this level was far beyond him for now, but there was nothing he could do except hope the Grand Cosmos Formation would be enough to stall Bladier long enough to save Fry. He used Void Step trying to flee, but a strange wave of light wrapped around his body and halted him mid-air. "Where do you think you're going, Snow Lionheart?" With his palm raised toward him, Bladier stepped out of the pillar of light wrought by the Grand Cosmos Formation unscathed, untouched by Snow's attack. Snow pushed the War King's form to its very limit, barely breaking the shackles of light Bladier had placed on him, then stood at the fore with Fry behind him. "Run, Snow. You're no match for him," Fry said hoarsely, trying to stem the horrifying bleeding. Snow lifted Vermithor, facing Bladier, a monster with 1 foot already in SSS class. "I know he's far stronger than me, and I know I have no chance of beating him. But what choice did you leave me? Damn it. I can't just let you die here." He leveled his blade at Bladier. Snow didn't know what he should do. He had leapt into the fray without thinking when he saw Fry on the verge of death. But once he arrived, he understood how little he could actually accomplish in a field like this. Bladier had suffered a great deal of damage fighting Fry, yet even so, he remained an SSS-class monster who could crush the likes of Snow with ease. Between a collapsed Fry and a Snow who had just set foot on the battlefield, both now stood at the mercy of the man backed by 35 million souls. "I no longer care, bearer of Vermithor, whether you're an envoy of the Lord of Light or anything else. Here and now, both you and Fry Starlight will die." Determined to put an end to their lives, Bladier struck with all his might, letting the shadow of death sweep over both Fry and Snow, bringing them closer to their end than ever before. Fry Starlight had lost. He had done everything, poured out his entire strength in a desperate attempt to achieve the impossible and defeat an SSS-class fighter. But in the end, even he was destined for failure. Though he came close, so close that Bladier himself felt death brush against him at the very end of their battle, it wasn't enough. He was that close, yet history only remembers the victors. What he achieved meant nothing if death was to be his end. One could say that all of Frey's struggle, all he had offered, had been for nothing. Snow Lionheart intervened at the last moment, trying to salvage what he could. But he lacked the strength to stand against someone like Bladier in his current state. The High Priest had taken damage, he was far from unscathed, but what power he retained was still more than enough to crush Snow. "You fool! You should have run when you had the chance." Fry forced the words out, blood continuing to gush from his wounds. His body had shriveled, seizing violently, drained of all color. He looked like a man afflicted by some terrible disease that had ravaged him completely. The sight was so pitiful that Snow could hardly bear to look at him. "Shut up and focus on staying alive. I'll figure out some way out of this mess," Snow snapped, gripping Vermithor tight, eyes fixed on Bladier, racking his mind for a way out. But the High Priest gave him no time. Spear thrust forward, he unleashed a colossal beam of light that threatened to consume them both. The sheer weight of aura behind that attack was staggering, and for the first time Snow felt true dread as the target of such force. Before, He had only watched the battle from afar and felt the scale of Bladier's power. But now that he was on the receiving end, it was far worse. Summoning everything the War King's form could offer, he unleashed the strongest one-sword strike he possessed, splitting the radiant beam in two. Snow barely withstood it, scorched by the searing light as it tore across his body. Even a mere brush left his flesh and skin burning. And when it finally ended, when the light faded at last, Snow staggered, gasping for air. All that, from just one attack? He cursed, realizing the vast gulf between himself and his foe. The idea of fighting Bladier at all felt meaningless. This wasn't even a battle. The gap was far too great. Even Fry, with his overwhelming power, had been toyed with for most of the fight. Had it not been for that strange state he reached at the end, Bladier would have simply played with him from start to finish. What does it take to reach that level of power? What path must I follow? What price must be paid? Snow had been pondering that for some time. The issue of paths gnawed at him. SSS-class power wasn't something that could be attained by ordinary means. To reach it, one had to walk extreme roads that demanded unthinkable sacrifices. Bladier had chosen the path of sacrifice, offering millions of souls. Fry had followed the path of blood, killing thousands to grow stronger. Even the path of demons demanded abominations. Snow himself had been forced to eat his own kind. It seemed every path demanded some form of bitter sacrifice, in exchange for the power one desired. And so Snow Lionheart couldn't help but wonder, what kind of sacrifice would he himself one day have to make, if he wished to reach that level? That was, if he even survived today. The Imperial hero's mind raced, searching for a way before Bladier struck again. Fighting wasn't an option. Death was all that awaited them if he tried. Words were his only hope. Bladier, do you realize the catastrophe you're about to cause? Snow roared, loud enough to make the High Priest pause for a moment. If combat failed, persuasion was the only card left. I am the messenger of the Lord of Light you worship above all else, the bearer of Vermithor. To kill me now would mean defying the very teachings of the church you represent. Snow leveraged the Lord of Light's name as a bargaining chip, using his position as Vermithor's wielder to try and sway him. Surely Bladier, a man of the church, would care. But the High Priest didn't falter, not even for a heartbeat. We have no need of you, Snow Lionheart, nor of the Lord of Light you represent, Bladier said, his tone heavy, leaving both Snow and Fry stunned. We have no need of a god who abandoned his followers, who ignored them for centuries. The church will move forward regardless. I will become the new Lord of Light, replacing the old. With a sweep of his spear, he cast them back on a tide of light. Unlike him, I am here, and I will lead this church until my final day. With this overwhelming power, I will destroy all our enemies, demons, and even the Lord of Light himself should he dare intervene. Bladier declared arrogantly, crowning himself the supreme force upon the earth. You've gone completely mad, Snow shouted, forcing himself to stand and shield Fry. The latter spat blood, showing his disdain. Joseph Bladier, you think that just by breaking into SSS you can do whatever you want? You barely broke through. It's no exaggeration to say you're the weakest fighter of this class in the world right now. You nearly lost to me, and I haven't even reached SSS. How do you expect to stand against the real monsters you're so eager to challenge? No matter how he looked at it, Fry knew Bladier was deluded, blinded by his own power. Yes, what he had was incredible. But compared to the horrors this world still hid, it was little. And Bladier wasn't listening. You don't understand, Fry Starlight. Even if someone stronger than me appears, I'll simply surpass them, through the power of sacrifice. Boom! The entire battlefield shook as Bladier unleashed his might, shattering both Snow and Fry. Snow most of all, for he stood at the front, shielding his friend. I will rebuild the church anew. I will create followers far more faithful than those before them. Followers who will believe in no one but me, willing to sacrifice themselves at any moment, without hesitation. With such devotion, my power will know no limits. At his command, countless spears rained down mercilessly. Snow could do nothing but clutch Fry tightly, flashing through the void again and again with void step, barely evading annihilation. But after mere minutes of running, battered by blow after blow, Snow stumbled, crashing down with Fry falling to the ground beside him. Fry still could not move. Snow, in just a few minutes, had taken so much punishment that his face was drenched in blood. And Bladier showed no intention of letting them go. "Damn it! At this rate, we're really going to die," Snow muttered bitterly. Every path, every possibility he thought of, all ended in death. Fry, lying broken on the ground in the worst state imaginable, let out a strange laugh at Snow's words. "You shouldn't have come back for me, my friend. You should have lived. If you've got enough strength left to spout that nonsense, you'd better use it to heal instead," Snow retorted coldly. But before he could say more, a searing radiance engulfed them from behind. Another devastating beam swallowed them whole in an instant. Even with void step carrying them farther and farther, Bladier was still on their heels. The light consumed them, and in the next moment both men lay amidst a path of destruction. Fry collapsed helplessly. Snow stood over him, shielding him with his body, taking the brunt of the blast. His back was a bloody ruin, his face twisted with pain. It was as though a bomb had exploded directly behind him. Yet despite the agony, Snow had not hesitated. He had taken it all for Fry. Shaking, he staggered back to his feet, a hollow, blood-stained smile tugging at his lips. "We're dying, Fry. Sorry, but I don't think there's a way out of this." "Ha ha ha." Snow laughed weakly, lifting Fry once more, forcing his body to move, void stepping again into the distance. "There's no point. We can't leave the island," Fry said with a faint, almost mocking smile, unconcerned with the agony ripping him apart. He was right. Even if Snow void stepped to the farthest reaches, he'd only meet the island's edge. Escape was impossible. "I know, but I'd rather try than just sit here waiting for death." Carrying Fry over his shoulder, Snow pressed on. But the oppressive aura at his back made it clear. Running would never be enough. Maybe we could have survived if Dawn were here. With his survivor's ability, even Bladier wouldn't be able to kill him, Fry whispered weakly from Snow's shoulder, speaking of the companion they had left behind. "Ha ha. Yeah. That would have been nice," Snow agreed, forcing himself to keep moving. But finally his body failed. He could go no farther. He knew Bladier stood behind him. Snow froze for an instant. Then a gentle smile spread across his face. "Sorry, Fry, and thank you for everything. It's been an honor to fight beside you, until the very end." He whispered the words into Frey's ear, and the next moment, both their eyes darkened. When Bladier's spear impaled them brutally, blood spilling in torrents. The spear tore through Snow's back, piercing everything in its path, driving straight through Fry as well. Bladier lifted his spear slowly, and with it, both bodies rose, impaled and helpless. This is the end. No more tricks, no more surprises, only death. With a sharp motion, he flung them aside, leaving gaping, bloody holes in their chests. So simply it ended. Both Fry and Snow defeated, powerless before the high priest who emerged victorious. Bladier had won, and his great triumph was only the beginning, the dawn of a new era, the birth of a new church, and there could be no better beginning. In those fleeting moments of victory, Bladier found himself turning, drawn without knowing why, toward the golden tree. It blazed brighter than ever, like a divine lantern lighting up the sky. Its light swallowed the entire island, including Bladier, who stood frozen beneath its brilliance. Far from the battlefield, in those final minutes of Bladier's relentless pursuit of Snow and Fry, a girl had been watching, Uriel Platini. Her body was twisted, marred by bloody symbols and punctured scars left by tubes. Limping, leaning against the wall for support, she dragged herself step by step, trying to reach a place where she could see the battle with her own eyes. Uriel, normally so cheerful, now revealed a face twisted with exhaustion, pain, and despair. Crushed beneath the weight of guilt and regret, she had torn her own beautiful features with her nails without realizing it, leaving behind a bloodied, pitiful visage. The thought of ending her life had gnawed at her for the last few minutes. Yet she couldn't bring herself to do it. Not yet. Not when Fry and Snow had suffered because of her. Not when she bore responsibility for the monstrous power the High Priest now wielded. Indirectly, Uriel had killed millions. She had helped give birth to this catastrophe that threatened to wipe them all out. "They're going to die because of me," she whispered, standing at the crumbling edge of the great citadel upon which the World Tree still loomed. From that vantage, she could see the battle unfold in the distance. Though calling it a battle was generous. Fry and Snow could do little but flee in desperation, while Bladier hunted them down like prey. Watching from afar, Uriel felt her broken heart sink deeper and deeper into darkness. She had often wondered, why had Fry fought with such ferocity in his final duel against Bladier? He surely had his reasons. But what Uriel remembered most vividly was the promise she had made him give her. The promise that he would come to save her when the time came. And that time had come. Fry had never spoken of it aloud, but from the way he fought, it was clear he had taken that vow to heart. If only I had been braver back then, if only I had had the resolve to stay by his side, none of this would have happened. Uriel collapsed slowly, unable to stand any longer. The endless rituals had drained her completely, especially the final sacrifice she had unwillingly contributed to. Her helplessness only deepened the weight of guilt crushing her soul. She regretted many things. She regretted hiding her true feelings behind a false smile her entire life. She regretted making Fry Starlight promise her something so heavy. And most of all, she regretted not staying with him when the church summoned her and Urasha away. The saint had always been something sacred to the church, the virgin who walked alongside the hero. The saint was believed to be a blessed vessel of the Lord of Light himself, her presence always deemed essential. Yet ever since the sacrifice of the first hero, Casus Valerian, the first saint had vanished without a trace. Rumors abounded. Some said she perished in war. Others whispered she had fled and ended her life in solitude. But the truth was never known. What the church did still have, however, was her blood, kept preserved through the ages. The blood of the first saint contained a vast reservoir of holy power, often used for healing. In time, it became the only remnant of her that remained. And so, to preserve their standing, the church began its search for maidens, pure, untouched girls with a natural affinity for holy power, into whose veins they would inject that blood. Thus, the saint candidates were born. Girls taken from their families, adopted into the church and remade into vessels. The blood of the first saint was not enough on its own, so it was diluted with the sacred waters drawn from the World Tree's spring. The result created a new saint each time. But the experiments, the burden of such vast power, were crushing for children so young and innocent. Even if a saint emerged successfully, her body could never truly withstand the weight of that power, nor wield it properly. None ever surpassed the SS Plus rank since the first saint, and most died before the age of 30, their fragile bodies collapsing under the strain. Urasha had been the last of them, until her power was transferred into Uriel Platini, condemning her to the same fate. Urasha, she was the one who taught me how to smile, how to face this world without showing my pain. Uriel Platini had been only 6 years old when High Priest Platini adopted her, ripped from parents she could not even remember. From that age, her body had been scarred with bloody symbols carved into her skin. Into her veins, they had injected the blood of the first saint, so that she might bear the so-called blessing of holy power. But Uriel's blessing had been nothing but suffering. She had known pain since childhood, pain without hope, for every saint candidate understood that death was their only end. Some clung to blind faith and accepted their fate. Others knew something was deeply wrong, but could do nothing. Uriel had endured her life with quiet strength, mastering the art of smiling while bleeding inside. For a time, she had lived as though she were normal, and her years in the temple had been her happiest memories. There she made many friends, There, she learned what it felt like to smile with genuine joy instead of a mask. And at the end of those years, she met Fry Starlight, the strange boy who had appeared from nowhere, carrying burdens heavier than hers. Watching his suffering, watching the way he fought, had made Uriel want to help him. She had felt a kinship between them, but the difference was stark. Fry had chosen to fight against his cursed fate. Uriel had done nothing but wait quietly for death. He had fought battles far worse than the one she had been born into. Yet despite the endless trials, Fry had always won. He had never broken. Seeing him struggle so desperately had given Uriel a faint glimmer of hope. She saw in him the strength she herself lacked, and so, without even realizing it, she had clung to him, selfishly, unforgivably, asking him to save her. Even knowing the suffering he endured, suffering far greater than mine, I still dared to drag him down with me, begging him to rescue me. Her eyes had long since dried. She had no more tears left to shed. Fry Starlight and Snow Lionheart, both were about to die because of her. If she could have sacrificed herself to save them, she would have done it without hesitation. But she did not have the power to do so. I'm supposed to be the saint now. I carry the power of my predecessors, these cursed blood runes carved into my flesh. Uriel screamed, thrusting her hands forward, toward the place where Snow and Fry stood. Holy power, angels, anything. She had once been able to command every angel upon this world. She still bore a fragment of that power within her body, so she tried desperately to draw it out, for their sake. Please, I beg you, give me the strength to save them. Her runes bled as she tried to activate them. Lord of Light, my ancestors, grant me your power. Even one angel, even the faintest spark. It didn't matter. She would throw her life away without hesitation if it could save them. She called upon the Lord of Light. She invoked the names of the saints whose blood and power flowed within her. She prayed and prayed, but nothing answered. No matter how she tried, no one came. Her desperate struggle lasted only minutes before her eyes caught a scene that shattered what was left of her spirit. The sight of Bladier's spear piercing both Snow and Fry at once, extinguishing the light in their eyes in a single merciless blow. It was over. There was nothing left to save. No! The word left her lips as an empty whisper, drowned beneath Bladier's triumphant laughter that echoed across the island after he felled his foes. Uriel collapsed to the ground, tears flooding her eyes though she had thought them long spent. I couldn't do anything. Until the very end, I did nothing. Helpless, powerless. She had lost everything. I killed them. With these hands, I killed them. Her blood-stained arms trembled as she blamed herself for it all. For the catastrophe. For their deaths. And so she resolved to end her life. Fry, Snow, everyone, I'm sorry. Her apology was a whisper to the dead, as the runes across her body began to glow. She wished only for death now, to put an end to the torment she could no longer bear. She had lost everyone she had ever cared for. She carried a guilt too great for anyone to endure. Death, she thought, would be her release. But even death was denied her. The power within her refused to obey, refused to grant her even the mercy of an ending. Realizing this, Uriel, overcome with rage and despair, clawed at her own throat, tearing at it savagely, desperate to end her life with her own hands. Madness consumed her final moments. The burden she carried was too heavy for a single soul. She ripped at her neck with feral violence, nearly ending herself, but then a strange golden light burst forth, stopping her hand before she could strike the fatal blow. The light did not only restrain her, it healed her torn flesh, slowly, gently, suffusing her with an alien warmth. This is not your fault. Along with the golden radiance came a soft, tender voice, whispering by her ear. Uriel turned toward the source, toward the golden world tree behind her. And there she saw something she had never imagined possible. From within the tree, a pure aura poured forth, weaving and coiling until it formed a shape, the figure of a woman. A noble lady, radiant with a sacred presence unlike anything Uriel had ever seen. Her long golden hair flowed like sunlight, her face ethereal, with only her nose and smiling lips visible. Her eyes were veiled beneath a black cloth embroidered with a golden symbol Uriel could not comprehend. She wore the vestments of a church nun, and in her appearance, Uriel saw a reflection of herself. But the pressure she exuded defied imagination, greater even than what Fry or Bladier had revealed, perhaps greater than both combined. With her holy radiance, the woman illuminated the island, drawing every gaze toward her. Power divine, aura noble. Uriel did not know who she was, but she could guess. The saint. For there could be no mistaking it. This was none other than the first saint, the one erased from history, the one the world had long forgotten. Beneath the skies of Noctera, from within the majestic world tree itself, a mysterious woman emerged, unseen by mortal eyes for countless ages, draping the island in golden light that overwhelmed the prevailing darkness. An aura of purest gold radiated from her, accompanied by a noble presence unlike any other. Uriel Platini was the first to notice her, being the closest. Her wounds began to mend instantly, healed simply by the proximity of that overwhelming sacred power. A holy force, a noble presence, a familiar figure. This woman was a saint. But which saint? This is not your fault, Uriel Platini. There is only one true culprit for this heinous crime. The saint's voice was gentle, though her tone carried an undeniable weight. Her eyes were hidden behind a black blindfold embroidered with a golden sigil, concealing her vision yet not her clarity. Even without sight, she immediately discerned the true enemy. And that enemy was none other than Joseph Bladier. He recognized her presence at once. Her figure was too distinctive, her name too sacred in church records for him not to know. Yet still he refused to believe. This is impossible. She was supposed to have vanished long ago, already dead and gone from this world. Yet here she was, appearing at the most critical moment of his life. Her golden aura reached out, pulling both Snow and Fry away from danger. As the saint rose slowly into the sky, her every movement measured and solemn. Dawn Saint, Leora. Bladier uttered the name aloud, stunned as recognition struck. For centuries, she had been venerated in books and hymns as the saint who once stood beside the first hero, battling demons of unimaginable might during the Great War, an age when SSS-ranked beings roamed freely. And she looked exactly as the records described, untouched by time, her youth preserved as though the Great War had ended only yesterday. There must be some trick here. Bladier ascended into the air to meet her, rising to her level. There are no tricks, Joseph Bladier, the saint replied, her expression firm, her aura intensifying until the golden light eclipsed his. What stands before you now is one of the founders of the very church you have defiled with your hands. Her radiance bore down upon him, forcing dread into his heart. Defiled it? I am the church. The church is me. I kept this order alive when you vanished, abandoning it. Bladier roared back, unleashing the full extent of his newly awakened SSS aura, struggling to push back against her overwhelming presence. The saint merely raised her hand, and from the void, golden chains manifested like furious serpents, coiling tightly around him. They constricted with such strength that Bladier could not break free. I never abandoned anything. I was always here, sheltered within the great tree, preserved across the ages. The Dawn Saint, Leora, had been here all along, concealed within the world tree that humanity had worshipped but never truly understood. I have no eyes with which to see this world, for I lost my sight long ago. But I never needed them to witness the atrocities you committed with your hands. You who claim to be the church, how can you represent its faith when you desecrated every value and doctrine it once stood for? Each word from her lips inflamed Bladier's anger. Silence. I have no interest in hearing another word from you. Clutching his great spear, he tore through the golden chains and lunged forward. The Lord of Light abandoned me long ago. The first hero gave his life and vanished. And you You disappeared without warning. By what right do you judge me for what I've done? Boom! His spear clashed with her raised palm, unleashing a deafening storm of power. But the truth was undeniable. Bladier's light paled before her absolute gold. The Lord of Light never abandoned anyone, Bladier. He is a noble, mighty being whom we chose to follow. But we never claimed him to be a god. He was never omnipotent. That was a truth known by all in the past. It was you who twisted the truth. You who rewrote history to suit your desires. Her golden radiance surged even brighter, forcing him back and threatening to overwhelm him entirely. You claimed to embody the church, but you represent no one but yourself. Because of you, millions of innocents died. By your filthy hands, you nearly brought about the death of this generation's greatest heroes. Forming a strange seal with her hands, Leora unleashed her full strength. This is the burden I have borne in silence. For centuries I was bound by the vow, forced to endure as I watched, unable to intervene. Her words unsettled Bladier, especially the mention of a vow. But his attention was fixed on the overwhelming aura forming behind her. From her seals emerged a celestial figure, an awe-inspiring being, immense enough to cast its shadow over the entire island. Golden eyes glared down at the bishop, ready to deliver judgment. I had no choice but to break that vow. When this generation's heroes fell, when death stood a step away from them, then the old had to return. To cleanse the chaos you have unleashed, Joseph Bladier. Leora's revelation confounded him. He could hardly believe she had been slumbering within the world tree, preserved by its divine blessing, waiting for this very moment. But to defeat an SSS-ranked being, another SSS was required. And Leora had reached that stage long ago. Divine lament, tears of salvation. With those words, she summoned a golden pillar from the heavens, a cascade of light like tears of salvation and judgment, descending upon Bladier. The sacred technique scorched his body and spirit alike, leaving him writhing against its might. But still, he resisted, grinding his teeth, summoning the fury of the 35 million souls that burned within him. Do not think for a moment that you can defeat me, Leora. Struggling forward through the storm of light, he advanced, his madness refusing to yield. Your time is over. There is no place for you in this world anymore. Return to your grave. Upon this earth and beneath this sky, I am the Lord of Light. Clinging to his arrogance and obsession until the end, Bladier refused to fall. Even against an SSS saint, he did not flinch. There is no right or wrong in this world. The victor is the one who writes its laws. The victor decides what is true. And I am the victor. I am the one who will rule this land. I will fight until my last breath, with the boundless power bestowed upon me. His cry was a savage roar of defiance, hurling himself against the saint's judgment. In the end, Bladier was caught off guard when she came at him herself, striking from close range. A saint was never meant to fight on the front lines. Her role was support. Close combat was never her domain. But Leora disregarded such logic entirely. She was far too fast for him to react. In an instant, her right hand pressed against his chest, unleashing a strange force that surged violently through his body. Joseph Bladier, she said softly, her tone carrying a divine weight. This power was never yours to begin with. You are nothing but a usurper who stole strength by sacrificing countless innocent souls. Souls that never belonged to you. For that reason, I must set them free, to grant them the salvation and freedom you so cruelly stole. At her words, Bladier felt something within him tear apart. And then, without warning, his back exploded, spewing forth thousands, no, millions of radiant motes of light that burst free from his body at the first chance they had. The bishop screamed in agony, his very essence cracking and collapsing. You may not realize it yet, Leora declared, her voice calm but merciless. But you have already lost. Bladier tried to respond, tried to muster strength. But his power had collapsed, fleeing from him under the saint's assault. Arrogance blinded you. Your newfound strength swelled your pride so greatly that you dared call yourself a god. But the truth is clear. You are nothing but a thief, a usurper, and even with all you've stolen, your might isn't enough to cover a single corner of this vast universe. Leora pressed her hand harder against his chest. The flood of souls poured from him faster and faster, shredding him from within as his screams echoed powerlessly across the sky. In desperation, Bladier tried to invoke the blood runes carved into his flesh, his last resort to bind the souls to his body before they escaped entirely. But Leora had already seen through him. With a single gesture, she purified the markings, erasing them instantly and stripping him of even that final chance. The path you chose, the sacrifice of others to empower yourself, is nothing but a vile, demonic road. It bears no relation to the Lord of Light or his kind, not even in the faintest shadow. Joseph Bladier, perhaps you thought you were the manipulator, pulling the strings of others. But in the end, you too were nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. And the very runes etched upon your body stand as proof of that. From the beginning, these practices were never of the Lightbearers, nor of the Lord of Light. They were foreign, demonic rites, insidiously planted within the church long ago. Roots of corruption ran too deep, poisoning the church until it birthed today's catastrophe, a calamity that nearly erased the new generation of heroes, and would have, had the saint not broken her chains and returned. Bladier himself was nothing but a product of that corruption, a victim as much as he was its monster. Leora knew this, and for that reason she resolved to end it swiftly. This would have been a harder fight had you mastered your stolen strength, had you faced me in your prime. But your battle with Fry Starlight drained you. You have nothing left to give. As easily as you gained this power, so too do you now lose it. These innocent souls were waiting for their first chance to escape you. And that chance is now. As his body convulsed and tore, as the radiant lights poured out in an unstoppable tide, the saint pressed down one final time, ending the battle that had dragged on far too long. Divine lament, dirge of the saint. With her final hymn, her power surged through his body. In moments, the bishop's form shattered utterly. The Tower of God crumbled into dust, scattered upon the wind. Leora stood there, suspended in the heavens, as millions of radiant lights rose around her. Souls that had finally been released, freed from torment and captivity. Amid the majestic sight that lit the world in gold, she smiled gently, lifting her head toward the sky. I broke the vow. In the end, she had stepped forth before her time, unable to remain bound by her silent oath. For years she had endured, watching but never acting. But when the new generation of heroes were on the brink of death, she shattered her chains and returned once more to the world. And so, I shall be the first to leave, after you, Kazis. The words carried from her lips with a bittersweet smile as she descended, returning to the sacred temple beneath the world tree, the one place left untouched by the ruinous battle. There, beside Uriel, lay Snow and Fry, sprawled in pools of their own blood, deep wounds carved across their chests. Leora's golden light had drawn their bodies back to Uriel, who tried desperately to heal them. But no matter how hard she tried, she could do nothing. All she saw when she looked upon them were corpses, lifeless husks. That dreadful truth kept her from even registering the majestic sight of the freed souls ascending into the sky. Her world was collapsing before her eyes. But Leora reassured her, descending gently from the heavens. Do not fear. They will not die. As if those were the very words she had been waiting for, Uriel turned toward her with trembling eyes. Can you save them? The saint nodded, and Uriel's eyes lit with desperate hope. She fell to her knees before Leora, bowing until her head touched the ground. Please, I beg of you, save them, please. Leora lifted her at once, pulling her back to her feet. There is no need to bow your head, dear child. I would have saved them regardless. Her smile was soft, her voice warm, as she stepped toward the two fallen warriors. Their wounds are mortal to ordinary men, but they are no ordinary men. Fry Starlight possesses a strange body, one that adapts to every torment he endures. And Snow Lionheart was never truly human to begin with. With a little aid from my sacred light, they will endure. She released her golden aura, wrapping their broken forms in brilliance. The golden light filled the holes in their chests, mended their shattered bodies, and began stitching closed the wounds that had nearly ended them. From behind, Uriel watched in awe. She had never seen such sacred power before. Ordinarily, holy light glowed green, but Leora's was golden, purer, stronger, far beyond anything Uriel herself possessed. The sight convinced her without doubt that this woman before her was beyond comprehension. It did not take long. Their bodies were healed. Only their spirits remained to awaken. The speed and precision of the miracle was but a glimpse of what Leora had been in her prime, on the battlefield, where she once fought behind the first hero, Casus Valerian, and the great house's champions. Back then, none had feared injury. With her at their side, wounds vanished in an instant. They had even said the Dawn Saint could steal souls back from death itself, so long as she reached them in time. Before such a figure, Uriel could feel nothing but gratitude and awe. When she saw Fry and Snow restored, Uriel bowed once more, thanking the saint from the depths of her heart. But Leora stopped her once more. "I do not deserve thanks," she said gently. "For years, I stood by as the church committed its sins and atrocities, and I did nothing to stop it." Her words, spoken from guilt, only deepened Uriel's curiosity. She dared to ask, "My lady, forgive my impertinence, but I must know what truly happened in the past. Why did you spend all these years hidden away? And why now, of all times?" Uriel's questions were many. Leora merely smiled in reply. "I promise you, every question in your heart will be answered. But first, let us wait until they awaken. I am certain they will want to hear the story as well." Uriel nodded. There was much mystery yet to be unraveled, and many truths only Leora could provide. Truths from someone who had lived through the Great War centuries ago, the war that ended with Casus Valerian's sacrifice. Both Fry and Snow deserved to hear those truths. So, until they stirred, Leora and Uriel stood at the edge of the great temple, gazing at the wondrous sight of millions of lights, souls rising one by one into the heavens. Uriel, in particular, was overwhelmed. She felt the crushing weight of guilt as she watched the liberated souls vanish into the sky, souls taken and slaughtered because of her. "You are not guilty, Uriel Platini," Leora reassured her softly. "Like those countless souls, you too were only a sacrifice, an unwilling pawn in the schemes and horrors of others, of Bladier, and of whoever it was that pulled his strings from the shadows." Uriel understood but shook her head. "I know I was manipulated. I know I had no choice. But that doesn't change the fact that I was the direct cause of their deaths. Of all those innocent lives." She lifted both her trembling hands, despising her own weakness and helplessness. "If only I had enough power, enough courage, perhaps it would not have ended this way." Listening, Leora shook her head gently. She placed her hand on Uriel's arm, and with her golden light, began to purify the twisted blood runes carved into her skin. "Power is not always the answer, Uriel Platini," Leora said. "No matter how strong you become, there will always be someone stronger. I am proof of that." The golden radiance spread, cleansing the corruption from Uriel's body, as Leora infused her with sacred light. "It is not power that defines us, child. It is the choices we make, the paths we walk, the destinies we forge with our own hands." She smiled warmly. "I see now. They injected you with my blood, along with the blood of the other saints." Uriel lowered her head, ashamed, but nodded. "This was how they preserved the saints' legacy, by forcing fragments of our blood into others. Your strength is part of us." But Leora shook her head. "No, those foreign traces do not strengthen you. They bind you, they limit you." She released more of her golden aura, purging the foreign blood entirely from Uriel's body. Uriel stared at her in shock, not understanding. Leora explained, "The strength was always within you. All you need is to awaken it. Not through twisted rites, nor through sacrifice, nor through blood, but through true awakening. Through your own potential. You carry it deep inside as I do. Train yourself and one day, you will reach it. Leora's voice carried absolute certainty. She had felt that same golden spark hidden within Uriel's soul. Still, Uriel was unconvinced. You mean to tell me that one day I could reach your level? That I could wield the same golden light as you? Leora nodded. Perhaps you might even surpass it. Those last words shook Uriel to her core. This was the first saint, the Dawn Saint herself, whose level had never been matched in centuries. Yet she claimed Uriel might one day exceed her. Uriel dared not refute her. She could only remain silent until their conversation was cut short. For in that moment, Fry and Snow stirred. Their bodies, once broken, moved faintly for the first time since falling to Bladier. Seconds later, they opened their eyes almost in unison. The sight of them alive overwhelmed Uriel. Her emotions burst forth as she embraced them both tightly, unable to stop herself. Everything happened so fast. Surprise was written across their faces, especially Snow's, who could not comprehend how he had survived at all. Fry, however, was calmer. Gently patting Uriel's back, he eased himself free of her arms. "We're alive," Snow whispered in disbelief. His last memory was of Bladier's final attack, followed by darkness. He still could not accept that he was breathing now, as if nothing had happened. Then both of them noticed her, the figure who had changed the entire flow of aura around them, who had saved them. With one look, they knew. Leora did not keep them waiting. Stepping forward, she addressed them with a soft smile. "Fry Starlight, Snow Lionheart, I know you must have many questions. But first, allow me to thank you both for all you have done. I am truly glad to see you alive." Then she turned her covered gaze toward Fry, whose silence had been steady until now. "I have no eyes to see you with, but from your aura, I can tell. You are not surprised, unlike your friend. Isn't that right, Fry Starlight?" Leora smiled. Fry held his silence for a long breath before finally answering. "To be honest, I had a feeling I wouldn't die here. Not like this, not in this place." His voice was heavy, remembering all the times death had eluded him, all the times he had failed to end his life. He had been forced to live, again and again, dragged back by forces outside himself. Death had never claimed him before. He could not believe this time would be any different. "I expected something would intervene, something to change the outcome. And it seems your arrival was that something. For that, I suppose I should thank you, Saint." Leora's smile deepened. "You realized who I was so quickly. Remarkable." Snow, still regaining his sense of reality, struggled to follow the conversation. Unlike Fry, he had been certain they were doomed. He needed time to accept survival. But Frey's violet eyes glowed as he looked at her. A presence of SSS rank. A sacred aura unlike any other. And your appearance, your very features. Identifying you is hardly difficult. You're the one who dealt with Bladier, aren't you? Leora nodded. "My name is Leora. I am the saint who once walked beside the first hero, Casus Valerian. And yes, as you guessed, I am the one who ended Bladier and saved you both." Her words confirmed Frey's suspicions, and at last revealed the truth of who she was. The saint who stood with the first hero. But wasn't she supposed to have died centuries ago? Snow asked in disbelief. "Yes," Fry answered. "She should be long dead. Yet here she stands before us." His tone held equal parts curiosity and suspicion. He had never imagined such a figure could still exist. Leora tilted her head, her faint smile never faltering. "I can see you both have much you wish to say." "That's right," Fry answered at once, rising back to his feet. "You are the saint, and you saved us before, so I assume you stand on our side. But there are too many questions that demand answers. First of all, why now? Why intervene at this time of all times? And where have you been all these years?" Frey's voice carried caution. Even though she had saved him, he never once lowered his guard before the saint. Too much mystery surrounded her. If she had been nearby all this time, then why had she remained hidden? Why not appear when the world was falling into chaos? Snow wanted to speak but held his tongue, for he too wanted to hear her answer. Thankfully, Leora did not shy away. Your questions are fair, Fry Starlight, and I will answer them all. There is no need for such hostility. She gestured toward the world tree, speaking calmly. Since the first war against the demons, the world believed I had vanished, that I had died, fading away somewhere unseen. But the truth is different. I have remained within the world tree all this time. It sheltered me, keeping me in slumber for centuries. The world tree was no mere plant, but a mysterious being of unfathomable power. Power enough to conceal even one of Leora's caliber without anyone ever discovering her presence. Though her body had slept, her consciousness had remained awake, entwined with the tree, ever watchful of the world. As for why I appear now, it was to save you, Fry Starlight, and you, Snow Lionheart. As for why I hid for so long, she paused, her tone deepening. That is another story altogether. A story that begins hundreds of years ago, with the first demon invasion, with the truths erased from history itself. The moment she mentioned that ancient war, the three of them, Fry, Snow, and Uriel, fixed their full attention on her. Little was known of that era. History's records were fragments at best. To Fry especially, it carried a heavier weight. He now knew he was not in another world but in the future of his own, which meant that first war had taken place shortly after the time of his own death, before his transmigration. Leora fell into a long silence, as though choosing carefully where to begin. I suppose I must start from the very beginning, but instead of words, it is better that I show you the things my eyes once witnessed, before I lost them. She clasped her hands together. At once, light engulfed Fry, Snow, and Uriel, drawing them into Leora's distant memories. Remarkable. You can make us see your memories, Uriel whispered in awe. Not all of them, Leora replied, smiling faintly. Only the clearest ones. And you, Fry Starlight, stop resisting me with your aura. If you continue, I won't be able to hold you here. Her tone was half annoyed, half amused. Fry lowered his guard slightly, offering a quiet apology. His aura had already reached SSS tier. If he wished, he could resist her intrusion entirely. The fact unsettled Leora, sparking further curiosity about his strange power. But now was her turn to answer, not his. The visions sharpened. The Earth hundreds of years ago. A peaceful, ordinary world, before everything changed. Before the gates appeared. Before the demon army poured forth, bringing humanity to the brink of extinction. Through Leora's eyes, they watched. The demons came from nothing, and in the span of mere days, they slaughtered us in numbers too great to count. We had no way to resist. The images were horrific. Demons tearing through flesh, bodies shredded apart in grotesque violence. A race that fed on aura, that brought only death wherever it set foot. In those days, humans began to awaken their abilities. They discovered they could wield aura. But their control was primitive, weak, unstable. We had no power to stand against the demons. Yes, mankind had awakened, but what could newborn strength do against demons who had existed for millions of years? The war was hopeless, one-sided. Humanity faced annihilation. Before Fry and the others, the scenes unfolded. Humanity broken, massacred daily by the millions. It was devastation beyond anything they had ever witnessed. Even the war of darkness seemed like child's play compared to the wholesale slaughter of the past. We died day and night, Leora said grimly. We could not even fight properly. But then, everything changed when they appeared. Fry and Snow both widened their eyes as figures emerged in the vision. A group of humans, yet unlike any they had seen before. They wielded aura with mastery, as though it had always belonged to them. They were strong, beyond strong, on a level no other humans of that era could even approach. It was they who first laid down the rules of aura, the combat styles, the very foundations upon which the world now stood. They were far ahead, almost impossibly so. Fry stared in shock. Snow too recognized one among them, a dark-skinned woman, an old man with a strange blade, a young spearman, and a small boy with short golden hair, soaring through the air. There were more, many more, but Fry knew these faces. He had seen them before in his father's memories within the Shadow Sect. He had even encountered one in Launder when he had found the nameless mask. They were the same. This group of outsiders, Leora continued, was the reason humanity survived. They shared their knowledge. They gave us their methods. And so we called them the Readers. The Readers, Fry repeated, unable to hide his astonishment. Leora nodded. Her expression was heavy with memory. When the gates first appeared, a book was discovered. It told of events eerily similar to what had befallen our world. The coming of the demons, the gates, the awakening of Aura. All of it was written inside, a mere novel authored by a man no one knew. A man who died quietly, in some forgotten corner of the world. In that moment a title appeared before them. Its name was Land of Survival. The instant Fry heard it, his head throbbed violently. The readers of that novel already knew what was coming. Armed with the knowledge written within, they grew powerful at incredible speed, and they guided humanity forward. To us, that book became sacred, a heavenly scripture, a revelation from another world. With the readers, we were able to rise. We were able to fight. All of it because of a single novel, long lost, yet carved into the minds of its readers. The revelation struck like thunder. A fictional story, predicting reality with perfect accuracy. That's impossible, Snow muttered, stunned. You are right, Leora said, nodding softly. It is impossible. And yet, it happened. The author died before we could reach him. He took the answers with him to the grave. And so, all that remained were his words, and his readers. She spoke with regret, her voice tinged with sorrow, for she believed the truth had died with that unknown author. But she could never have imagined that very author now stood before her, wearing the face of Fry Starlight, his expression twisting as he heard a truth he never thought he'd encounter. Humanity was on the brink of extinction centuries ago. The losses were astronomical, the dead uncountable. An entire civilization stood on the edge of annihilation. But because of the emergence of the few they called the Readers, mankind managed to breathe again, to rise on its feet against the brutal onslaught of the demons. The Readers never hoarded their knowledge, never bound it by chains of secrecy. They shared freely, thinking of humanity's survival before anything else. That was why so many chose to follow them. After learning so much from them, we finally managed to fight properly, to endure the invasion. But the war only grew harsher with time. Leora spoke with a solemn face, showing glimpses of the demon invasion. That vile race had two overwhelming advantages: their vast numbers and their terrifying vitality. A demon was hard to kill unless utterly destroyed. Given time, they recovered from nearly any wound. Humans, by contrast, fell permanently when dealt a fatal blow. These were the factors that made the war nearly impossible. And yet, despite it all, humanity endured. At a certain point, the tide began to shift. Losses became fewer. Each day more demons fell than before. New champions rose, heroes whose strength rivaled legends. Unlike the current age where humanity had grown sheltered, with the Ultras as their greatest concern across the seas, the ancient war was an entirely different ordeal. Losses were counted not in millions, but in billions. Before the gates appeared, Earth's population had reached 8 billion. After years of ceaseless war, only a few 100 million remained. Humanity stood at the edge of extinction. It was a merciless age, an era that forged monsters among men. Every race in this world has something that defines it. For humanity, it was our ability to adapt, Leora said, remembering the countless heroes who rose against despair, no matter the odds. She had been one of them. No matter the suffering, no matter how life crushed us, we adapted. We moved forward. In that age, countless warriors broke through to the SSS rank. A rank many of this era dismissed as myth was, back then, not uncommon. Earth had many who reached such heights, because they were monsters forged in an age where only that strength could grant survival. Humanity's ability to adapt was their sharpest weapon. Perhaps it was even why the demons experimented on them, injecting their blood into humans alone. Though demonic blood was poison and killed many, there were those who survived. Their bodies adapted, evolving from what should have been death into new power. That became humanity's greatest weapon, the edge they clung to in desperate times. After suffering humiliating defeats, after nearly being exterminated, we turned the tables. We slaughtered demons by the thousands and crushed the invasion that sought to wipe us out, Leora said, showing scenes of human triumph. Beside the readers, who were all terrifying in their own right, other humans rose to equal power. Casus Valerian, chosen by the mysterious Lord of Light. The great family leaders, even Leora herself, who bore the mantle of Saintess. Fry and the others watched silently, stunned by the sheer scale of the victories humanity achieved at the end of that war. The humans of that era, they were truly strong, Snow muttered, astonished by the strength of his ancestors, a strength beyond what he had ever imagined. A multitude of SSS-rank fighters, a strange group who knew the future. It was a generation that dwarfed the present by countless measures. With such strength, doesn't that mean they weren't just capable of surviving? Couldn't they have actually won? To end the demons once and for all. Snow's words carried conviction. In that terrifying generation, he saw power enough to accomplish it. But both Fry and Leora wore expressions that made it clear. This was a grave misunderstanding. A foolish illusion. What you just said, Snow Lionheart, is precisely the thinking that led to the disaster which changed everything. What made us realize how weak, how powerless we truly were. Leora's voice darkened as the memories shifted again. If humanity, even then with so many SSS-rank warriors, was weak, what was true power? And how did the current generation compare? When no one had reached SSS at all, not even Fry Starlight, their strongest. Leora answered patiently, from the very beginning. It began when we discovered that what we had faced then was only the vanguard of the demons. A mere fragment, not even a shadow, of the true army that race commands. Even after humanity purged the world of demons, even after victory upon victory, the gates above never closed, which meant at any moment more could come. In the moment of our greatest triumph, when we dared dream of salvation, came the first schism. Humans turned upon each other as we tried to decide our next step. The memory showed the moment humanity was forced into a fateful decision. Arrogance had taken root. We truly believed we were strong. That was when the faction arose, the one that demanded fire be answered with fire. They were mighty warriors, yet blinded by arrogance, convinced their strength could accomplish anything. They were the ones who slaughtered the most demons in those days. Titans like Cheon Ma, the sword god Avalon, or Ryan Night Wave, all of them were SSS-rank warriors, some even surpassing Casus Valerian himself. This faction was bloodthirsty for battle. They called upon all of humanity to carry the war into the demon's world itself. The moment Leora uttered those words, everyone stiffened. Even Frey's eyes narrowed. To Helmand, where the demon king himself resides, along with the highest seats and the dukes of hell, the ones we rarely ever clashed with. That's madness, Fry said coldly, emphasizing just how reckless and insane such a decision was. For men like Cheon Ma, it wasn't bravery, it was lunacy. They truly believed they could invade Helmand and destroy the demons on their own ground, as they had done to humanity. Snow and Uriel were struck by the sheer audacity of such warriors. But Fry saw only their folly, their arrogance. Leora continued, unflinching. As I said, we split into two factions after once being united. One demanded we strike first, that we carry the war into Helmand itself. The other faction, led by the readers who had guided us this far, opposed them fiercely. They argued we must hold the line, defend, and never provoke powers we could not contend with. The readers fought against the plan until the bitter end. They knew too much and they feared what lay beyond the gates. But the debate became conflict, and conflict became division. Humanity fractured. One faction yearned for war, to strike the demons on their own soil. The other called for unity on earth and defense only, insisting we had no chance in Helmand. The readers were our wisest, the very reason we survived the war at all. We should have all listened. But many were blinded by their own strength, intoxicated by the heights they had reached. The SSS rank itself was intoxicating. It was the reason Bladier once dared call himself a god simply for attaining it. And he was not the only one. Arrogance, overconfidence, ignorance. That was the true sickness of humanity. In the end, Kazis, the great houses, and I chose the reader's side. We chose to hold back, to trust their warnings. But I'll admit the truth, even we believed deep down that the warriors might be right. That fighting was the braver path. To strike first rather than sit idle, waiting for the next wave. With such strength at their command, many believed it was the only correct choice. We did not realize that had we not stepped back at the final moment, humanity would have been wiped from this world long ago. Leora said bitterly, and silence fell over the others. To explain, she showed them the vision. The day it happened, a host of proud warriors standing before the rift. Dozens of titans, their ranks led by monsters of the SSS rank. A force that, in this present era, could have ended the war with the Ultras in mere months. The previous wielder of Balerion, Chion Ma. The wielder of Dark Sister, Avalon. And countless more. They were not men. They were monsters in human form. And they marched boldly through the gate, into Helmand itself, determined to wage war against the race that had tormented humanity for so long. That day, our greatest warriors left Earth behind, setting foot upon a land unlike anything they had known. They carried with them the hopes of our entire race. That day marked humanity's first attempt to confront the demons directly. Leora paused, her expression a mixture of sorrow and bitterness. And that day was the last we ever saw of them. What? You mean to tell me all of them? All those SSS rank monsters died, unable even to escape? Snow burst out, shaken, Uriel's face mirroring his disbelief. Only Fry remained calm, for he alone understood the horrors that waited on the other side. We lost all contact with them the moment they set foot through the gate. Days passed, then weeks, then months. We waited, but no word ever came. They never returned. It was as if they had been erased. Slowly, despair consumed us, and we gave up hope. Some even volunteered to follow them to discover their fate. We gathered at the gate more than once, but none of us dared to enter. And then, after all that time, from the countless who had gone with pride, carrying the hopes of mankind, only one ever returned. Through the gate, only Avalon, the man once hailed as the sword god, staggered back. But what returned was not the man we once knew. Avalon left proud and unshakable, but came back broken, terrified. His body frail, his form mutilated. The light had been stripped from his eyes, leaving him blind. Whatever he faced on the other side destroyed him, body and soul. Nothing remained of the great warrior but fragments. It was a tragedy beyond words. Kazis Valerian and the others rushed to him at once, desperate to know what had happened in Helmand, to uncover the truth. But the shattered Avalon refused to speak. He fled from them, lips sealed. Whatever torture he had endured had shattered his spirit completely. And so no matter how they pressed, no matter how they begged, they never learned a thing. That incident rekindled the terror humanity had long forgotten after its fleeting victories, reminding them that the horrors were far from over. We didn't learn what had truly happened on the other side until much later, but we discovered that all our comrades had been massacred. They died unable even to fight back. In Helmand, there exists a demon who never leaves, one who remains dormant yet ever present. I never saw him with my own eyes, but what I heard was enough to make me fear him without facing him. The first seat of the high demons, Crimson, the Red Moon. The first seat never once leaves Helmand. remaining there for countless years as the immovable guardian of the path leading directly to his king. For Cheon Ma and the others, it was misfortune without equal. They ran headlong into him, along with the fourth seat Westgear, who happened to be nearby. The battle was one-sided. So much so that the great Cheon Ma, one of the strongest humans to ever live, was killed with a single strike from Crimson. A single blow that shattered Balerion, the Black Terror, into pieces, and with it, Cheon Ma turned instantly to dust. It is said Crimson slaughtered most of the humans who dared set foot in Helmand, while Westgear took a handful alive, keeping them breathing only to torment, to mutilate, and to break their spirits. Westgear was infamous for his sadism, his games of torture. And among those few victims was Avalon, the only one who somehow returned alive. The readers had warned us this was exactly what would happen, but we did not believe them. The strength we had gained filled us with arrogance. And in the end, we were forced to face the bitter truth. No matter how strong one becomes in this world, there will always be someone stronger. The gulf in power between those who merely reach SSS rank and those who reign at its peak is vast beyond imagination. Leora's words fell heavy. Snow and Uriel remained silent, both struggling to process what they had just heard. But Fry was different. He wasn't surprised, he saw it as inevitable. After all, these fools had dared not only to invade Helmand, but to pit themselves against Agi Aroth, the Demon King himself. Agaroth alone would have been more than enough to annihilate them in seconds. But with the strongest of the high seats also present, victory had never been possible to begin with. Still, something in Leora's account caught Frey's attention. "Leora, you said Avalon refused to speak to the end. Then how did you learn what happened on the other side?" It was a sharp question. If Avalon had kept his silence, then how did she know Crimson had struck Cheon Ma down? How did she know Westgear had been there? Fry wanted the truth, and Leora did not hide it from him. I was about to get to that. The meeting that changed everything. The one that made us forge the vow that has led us to this very moment. The vision shifted again, showing them a different memory. The one who told us what had happened to Cheon Ma and the others was not human at all. He had appeared before them from nowhere, one fateful day. He was the one guiding the readers from the shadows. A strange man none of us trusted. But the readers followed him blindly, and so we tolerated him, despite the fact that he was neither human nor of our kind. The memory sharpened, and Leora revealed the figure that had warped the fate of humanity itself. When the scene came into focus, Fry Starlight could only clutch his head as confusion and dread stabbed through him. The man who walked into the Council of Humanity's greatest warriors, the one who stood at the forefront of the readers, was cloaked in black, his features hidden. But his blue eyes, unmistakable, eyes Fry could never fail to recognize. It was none other than the engineer Gehrman. He told us what had happened to Cheon Ma and the others, and then he showed us a future, a vision of a world where we all died, sharing the same fate as our fallen comrades. The readers agreed with every word he spoke. He declared that we had no chance of victory, that we would be crushed, humiliated, no matter what we tried. But in the end, he added a condition: not in our era, not in our time. The engineer had been there since the first day of the invasion, watching the war unfold from beginning to end. He interfered only occasionally. It is even said that Cheon Ma himself had once been his follower, but chose instead to defy him, to fight, and to die against the demons. He told us that, in our age, victory against the demons was impossible. Utterly impossible. But far into the future, in a different era with different warriors, he claimed humanity would have its chance. He said he knew the future, knew the secrets it held. According to him, the only chance of victory lay hundreds of years ahead. His words were absurd, but undeniable in the wake of their crushing defeat. Many resisted his claim, but with the shadows of their dead comrades looming over them, despair crept in. They were forced to admit the truth. They could not defeat the demons if the true army ever turned its gaze toward them. The only reason they had survived as long as they had was because other, stronger races were fighting the demons elsewhere, drawing away the deadliest of their kind. The engineer urged them to endure, to remain hidden, to build a foundation for the future of their species. He promised that if they did, one day they would have their chance. However slim, what was strange, disturbing, was how the readers agreed with him completely blindly, as though their minds had been bent to his will. There was too much mystery surrounding that man. To trust him so absolutely was madness. But humanity had no choice. Their strongest had been slaughtered in an instant, their pride and hope reduced to ash. A single demon had plunged them all into despair. And so they clung to the only light of hope left before them. The engineer showed them the path, and they chose to follow it. We decided to believe him. Whether it was the readers or the heroes of the old generation, they chose to place their faith in the generations yet to come. After that, everything happened quickly. In order to give humanity an environment where new generations could rise, the gates, those ever-looming threats that could unleash demonic invasions at any moment, had to be dealt with. It was then that Casus Valerian chose to sacrifice himself to seal them. At that time, the old generation of heroes waged their final battle. It ended with Casus Valerian burning his own soul, consuming every last drop of his life and power to seal the gates shut. Many opposed what he intended to do, but Casus was a true hero, one with the courage and resolve to do what was right before anyone else. The gates closed. The threat of invasion was lifted, at least for a time. Before his sacrifice, Casus Valerian had left behind a family. And so did the leaders of the great houses. They passed down their bloodlines and their combat legacies, ensuring their descendants would inherit both skill and duty. Thus they laid the foundation for the next generation, passing the torch to their sons, and their sons' sons. And once they had prepared everything, each of them walked his own path, after making the same vow. We swore that one day, in the distant future, we would return and fight again, to achieve the victory that strange man had foretold. He had told them that stronger heroes would one day arise, heroes capable of accomplishing what they themselves could not. Their role was to prepare the way, to support those future champions. And to achieve that, the great warriors of old had to vanish. Their continued presence would only draw unwanted attention. So, one by one, they let themselves fall into obscurity, deliberately erasing their own existence. The saint, Leora, bound herself to the world tree. It embraced her body, preserving her through the ages. She hid all that time, waiting for the promised moment. But in the end, she broke her vow. She could not watch Fry and the others die before her eyes. She believed that those young men were among the heroes they had awaited. And so she stepped forth before her appointed time, returning to the world after countless long years. There were many details Leora did not share. But overall, this was the story of humanity across those ancient centuries. Does this mean that everything humanity has gone through until now was the result of manipulation by someone who wasn't even human? And that all those readers, and all the leaders of the great houses, are still alive somewhere? Uriel asked, pressing on the final point. In answer, Leora merely shook her head. I do not know if the others managed to keep their vow, but some of them are certainly still here, somewhere in this world, hiding themselves until the proper time. Just as I did. What we did was born of the urging of a being not of humanity. But at that time, what he showed us was the only seed of hope left to carry us forward. We trusted the readers, who had become like chosen messengers in our eyes. They trusted him. And so, in the end, we followed too. That is what led to the world you know today, to the founding of the great houses. Houses destined to be the cradle from which the long-awaited heroes would emerge. With that, Leora ended her tale, telling them all that needed to be told. Because of that vow, she could not reveal herself through all those years. Her presence would have drawn enemies humanity could never withstand. So she waited in silence, turning a blind eye to the horrors that plagued the world. Another reason she had believed the engineer's words was that she herself had once followed a being who was not human, the mysterious Lord of Light, who had aided them by bestowing power upon Casus Valerian. So she had no reason to reject the engineer simply for not being human. And in the end, They all followed him. Snow and Uriel needed time to absorb what their eyes and ears had just been shown. But for him, it only deepened the realization that Gehrman had been weaving his plans since a time far older than he had imagined, manipulating everyone on a scale far vaster than he had thought possible. Everything that had happened to humanity, all the schemes, all the conspiracies, it had all begun with him. By urging the ancient heroes, the engineer had shaped the very civilization the world knew today. All of it, to pave the way for the appearance of the new generation he had promised. But that was a lie. The only one the engineer had truly been preparing the world for was Fry Starlight himself. The thought that the engineer had gone so far, that he had built such a terrifying, far-reaching plan, only convinced Fry further. There was no escaping his destined path. A fate the engineer had been constructing for a very, very long time. Thanks to Leora, the Saint of Dawn, a long-buried fragment of the past was finally revealed. Truths that had been hidden from the present. The reality was nothing like what Snow and Uriel had believed their whole lives, raised on tales of heroes such as Casus Valerian and his glorious sacrifice. But in the end, even that sacrifice was revealed to have been instigated by someone else. The engineer who had walked the earth since hundreds of years ago. The heroes of mankind had tried to fight the demons, yet all that awaited them on the other side, in Helmand, was death, defeat, and utter despair. A defeat so absolute it drove the remaining champions of Earth to follow the strange vision shown to them by the engineer, convincing themselves that their only chance at victory lay far in the distant future. Once Casus sacrificed himself, each of us who had stood beside him went our own way. Be it the clan leaders or the readers, I do not know their fates, but I am certain some of them are still out there, somewhere in this world. With those words, Leora released Fry and the others from the thread of her memories. Silence hung between them for a long while. Snow was the first to break it, forcing out a dry laugh as he pressed a hand against his forehead. Ah, this is truly, truly disappointing. All eyes turned to him. Frey's, Uriel's, and even Leora's, wondering what exactly he meant. Snow spoke his thoughts aloud, giving them his honest judgment after everything he had heard. I don't know whether I should feel glad to learn that humanity still has all those mighty warriors, or despair at realizing that the very heroes I looked up to were nothing but cowards, defeated and manipulated by beings who weren't even human. His last words were aimed squarely at the saint, though she said nothing. Instead, Uriel spoke in her defense. "Snow, how can you say that?" she asked, genuine respect in her voice for the saint who had saved their lives. Fry remained neutral, but Snow's disappointment was raw and unmasked. "Saint Leora, I don't know much about you, and I am not one to judge others. But let me ask you this. Do you really believe this generation will bring you the victory you've been waiting for?" Taking a step closer, Snow's tone grew harsher. "I, along with the ones standing there," he pointed at Fry, "we are the strongest this generation has to offer," and his statement wasn't wrong. Yet even so, we lost. We died against Bladier, the same man you defeated with ease, without so much as a scratch. Tell me, Saint of Dawn, what do you see in us? What do you think we can possibly achieve when we couldn't even overcome a single man who is nothing compared to the enemies you once faced? Snow's point was clear. He couldn't stomach how Leora and the others had chosen to retreat, leaving everything to the future. What enraged him most was how blindly they had trusted a non-human entity they knew nothing about. While you were hiding all these years, this world suffered war after war, with millions dying. Wars that could have ended instantly had you shown yourselves instead of hiding. We die every single day, and this current war we're fighting is proof of that. In just a single day, Bladier alone had killed 35 million people, and the war was far from over. You said you broke the vow when you revealed yourself earlier. From that, I gather your return wasn't meant to happen yet. So tell me, had you chosen to keep hiding, leaving us all to die, what would have happened then?" The saint faltered, unable to answer. "This," she began, but Snow cut her off. "I'll tell you what would have happened. You and all your companions, you would have emerged only to find ashes. Nothing but the ashes of human corpses, the very people you claim to be fighting for. What good would that vow be then? What use would victory hold at that point? This was the only way, Snow Lionheart. No, damn it, it wasn't. Snow's voice grew sharp, anger spilling from him. Unlike Fry, who could somewhat understand Leora and the others because he knew the strength of the demons and the existence of the engineer, Snow could not. He had just tasted death at Bladier's hands, leaving a deep scar upon his soul. All his life, he had believed the legendary SSS rank to be the peak. He had believed the heroes of the past to be true champions, capable of standing against the mightiest demons. But reality crushed that belief. Even at SSS rank, the gulf was monstrous. The first seat, Crimson, had slain them with a single strike, as if they were nothing more than flies. And the engineer? With just a few words, he had manipulated them like livestock being herded toward the easiest escape. You were all just cowards. You chose to run instead of fight. That is the mindset of failures. You lived through centuries, witnessing all the horrors that ravaged this world. Horrors you could have ended with ease. And what did you do instead? Nothing. Snow's body trembled as he uttered his final words. Then he began to laugh. Ha! Ha! Ha 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 ha! This is pathetic. Pointing at himself, Snow showed Leora a broken smile. Look at me. I'm nothing but a weakling you could kill with a single strike. Tell me, what do you see in me? What do you think I have compared to you, the so-called heroes of old? What greatness do you see in me, and in my companions, that made you sacrifice all those countless lives just to wait for us? What exactly do you see? He roared before laughing again. Ah, you're blind, so I suppose you don't see anything at all. My apologies. Snow Lionheart was a simple, straightforward man. He simply couldn't comprehend what his predecessors had done, no matter how hard he tried. To him, they were nothing but a band of cowards, men and women who chose to run, closing their eyes to the countless humans who perished throughout those long centuries. All for the sake of a vow, for the words of a strange, non-human entity, words that carried no proof of truth or falsehood. You should have all gone into the demon's realm that day. Dying on the battlefield would have been an honor. A far greater end than hiding like cowards and placing your hopes on a generation not yet born. Snow spilled everything that weighed on his heart. His thoughts, his disappointment, his grief. He was about to say more, but a familiar hand gripped his shoulder, halting him. Snow, that's enough, my friend. You've said all that needed saying. It was Fry. The latter smiled faintly at him, then turned his gaze toward the saint. Forgive my friend. This war, and our last battle, cast deep shadows over him. His smile was strained, but Leora shook her head. No, there is no need to apologize. For in his words lies a measure of truth. Even if their intentions had been noble, even if their cause had been just, that did not change the fact that Leora had lived all these years knowing what transpired in the world, while possessing power enough to halt countless disasters. And yet, because of one vow, and the fear of an enemy that might come knocking if she revealed herself, she chose to hide, leaving humanity to die. Whatever the reason, there is no true justification for what I did. I know my guilt. I accept it. Leora's bitter smile carried that confession as she looked at Fry and Snow. No, you are not guilty. This time, it was Uriel who spoke, her words sincere. She clasped her hands and lowered her head, recalling the years she had spent within the walls of the church. She had seen much, and though her strength was modest, she could have influenced pivotal events. But she had remained silent, paralyzed by fear of what might happen to her. Because of that silence, disaster followed. 35 million lives were lost, a burden she would likely carry for the rest of her days. You are not guilty, or rather, none of us have the right to judge you. We have not endured what you endured, nor lived the life you and the other heroes of the distant past lived. It was always easy to speak, to cast blame on others. But what if the roles were reversed? What if they had lived in that age, forced to face what Leora and the others had faced? What would they have done? discovering that all the strength they had clawed their way to was nothing but child's play before an enemy who could erase SSS-ranked beings as if they were mere insects. There were doubts about the engineer, yes, but the readers had believed him. And the solution he offered was the hope they needed in their darkest hour. Perhaps you are guilty, or perhaps your choice was the right one. I don't know. But I do know this, had I borne the same burdens, I most likely would have chosen as you did. So who am I to judge you? Uriel said with a small smile. Fry nodded. Well said. Turning toward Snow, he reinforced Uriel's words. Snow, we did not live what they lived. We did not suffer what they suffered. Even if we were in their place, forced to choose, perhaps we too would have chosen the same. And besides, the past is done. There is no point in speaking endlessly of what cannot be changed. Our present and our future, those are what matter now. Frey's agreement with Uriel surprised Leora, who had not expected such words. She thanked them sincerely. On behalf of myself and of all my comrades, I truly thank you for those words. The words of Fry and Uriel did not erase the past, but they warmed her heart. Doubt had plagued her choices for centuries. Enough that she had finally broken the vow to save Fry and Snow. No thanks are needed. You are still the one who saved our lives. But let's see. There are many things you can help us with now, since you've chosen to reveal yourself. Fry said with a faint smile, already intent on seizing the opportunity of having gained an unexpected SSS rank ally. His calm composure, his unshaken demeanor despite all that had happened, these qualities earned Leora's admiration. Ask me anything, Fry Starlight. So long as it is within my power, I will aid you however I can. The saint declared her intent to cooperate. Snow, meanwhile, fell silent, choosing not to speak further as he wrestled with all he had heard. Uriel Platini, watching Fry intently from the side, found her thoughts drifting back to her earlier words, wondering what she herself, alongside Fry and Snow, would have done had the choice been theirs instead of Leora's. She knew well, she would have chosen as the saint had, which was why she did not see herself fit to judge. But Fry Starlight, he was different. Of that she was certain. He would fight to the end. No matter the foe, no matter the obstacle, he would fight until death. He had chosen long ago, and he had already learned how to die. That was why he could remain composed, even now. A man like that, so long as he stood beside her, Uriel felt that she too could fight, and perhaps find the courage she had always lacked. And so she resolved to grow stronger, to seize this chance no matter what it cost. Since the Saint of Dawn herself now stood among them, Fry took the initiative, already intent on using the Saint's presence to his advantage. And his first move struck straight to the heart of what plagued him most. To begin with, I'd ask your aid in destroying the shadow that dwells within my body, and in guiding our friend, the hero here, to find the path most fitting for him. The shadow dwelling in your body. I think I understand what you mean. I could sense something aberrant in the aura coming off you. Fry nodded, then stripped off his upper garments. The moment he did, Snow and Uriel both widened their eyes at the sight of his bare skin. A strange blackness had spread across his body, leaving him sickly, drained of his usual vitality. Fry, what happened to you? Uriel asked, alarmed. It's a long story. The short of it is, this body has hit its limit and I need treatment. Fry answered, turning to the saint. You wield a tremendous holy power. I'm assuming you can help me, right? He pressed the point. This was his top priority. The shadow infesting his body had grown so disruptive he was losing control of his strength. It had directly contributed to his loss against Bladier. He wouldn't be able to fight again unless he purged it fast. He'd pinned his hopes on the saint. Perhaps this was what the engineer meant when he said Uriel would lead him to the answer. Leora nodded and stepped closer, placing her palm to Frey's chest. Within seconds, her golden, sacred power surged into him, flooding his body with warmth and majesty. Fry felt an immediate rush of vigor, like his peak returning all at once. With power like this, he truly believed he could finally scour the shadow out, end the first shadow of Whisker once and for all. But after only a few breaths, a troubled frown creased Leora's face. She drew back her hand, cutting off the flow of holy power. Disoriented, Fry spoke first, recognizing at once that something was wrong. The tar-like shadow still clung to him. "Is there a problem?" "I'm sorry," the saint said, brow knit, "but I don't think I can purge something like this." Her calm words struck Fry like a thunderclap. He froze for a moment, then snapped. "You've got to be joking. If SSS rank holy power isn't enough, how am I supposed to strip this curse out?" This was not what he'd expected. He had truly believed Leora would be enough. He had underestimated the shadow. "There is a reason I cannot help you. But first, I need to ask you, Fry Starlight, what exactly is this thing?" Leora pressed her palm lightly to the darkened skin. "I have never seen anything so foul and twisted. It's like a fragment of hell itself." Her question piqued Snow's and Uriel's fear and curiosity alike, especially because it was something even Leora hesitated to touch. Fry wavered, then chose to tell them. There was no point hiding it anymore. "It's a curse placed on me by one of the upper demons, the fourth seat, Weskier." The truth left his mouth, and shock rippled through all of them, Leora included. "An upper demon? Wait, doesn't that mean we can't cure it?" Uriel asked, panic edging her voice, while Leora's frown deepened. "I won't ask how you faced a demon like that and survived. I doubt you wish to speak of it. But you must understand, holy power cannot save you from this," Leora said. She raised her hand, forming a golden ring of light. "Holy power exists to heal. It is an aura opposed to demonic essence, meant to aid and to support, not to destroy."